And good morning, everyone. Welcome once again to the George W. Crockett Jr. Community Law School. I'm getting an echo over there. My name is Chewy Correga. I have the great privilege and pleasure of serving as counsel for the NAACP Detroit branch. And I'm here this morning to just give you an idea of the wonderful program you're going to be experiencing today, as well as all of the opportunities that we have available to you. Now, this is the George W. Crockett Community Law School, which is an integral part of the Thurgood Marshall Ruth Bader Ginsburg legal initiative that we have at the Detroit branch. And what does all that mean? That means that we have a series of very beneficial legal programs that serve to protect and further the interest of our community here in Detroit. Why do we call it Thurgood Marshall and Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Because Thurgood Marshall and Ruth Bader Ginsburg were giants in the field of the law relative to civil rights. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I do want you to know that we continue to recognize them as leaders in our community. So what are you going to get today? First, you're going to hear from the man who I think is really responsible for the George W. Crockett Community Law School. John E. Johnson, Jr., as you might expect, after he helped us create George W. Crockett Jr. Law School, he's gone on to other things and currently serves as the executive director of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. So I'm going to let him tell you a lot of things about himself, but more importantly, I want him to tell you about George W. Crockett Law School, what it is, why it's here, and why we are continuing it. So John, can you just come on forward here?
All right. Thank you, Attorney Correga. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. As he said, my name is John Johnson. Serve currently as the Executive Director of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. But long time ago, about 28 years ago, served as the Executive Director of the NAACP Detroit branch. And during my first year as Executive Director, that was in 1997, we established the George W. Crockett Jr. Community Law School. And we did that in partnership with the Wolverine Bar Association. At that time, the president of the Wolverine Bar Association was Linda V. Parker, who is now a federal judge, and actually was one of my predecessors at the Department of Civil Rights. She served as his executive director also, I think from like about 2006 through maybe 2010. So pleased to have partnered with her to bring this law school to fruition. It was a vision that had a couple of purposes why we did this. One was to empower the community. This is community legal education. And we felt it was important to demystify the legal system and to be able to introduce these concepts to the community, not only so they could help themselves. People often come to lawyers after the problem has occurred as opposed to before. So this is a sort of a preventative means of teaching people and empowering people about the law. And we did it in a number of ways. We had domestic, we had family law and traffic law and criminal law and a number of areas which we introduced the community to these concepts. So that was important. They became obviously empowered themselves and then also could help others in their community. So that's why it was community legal education. The second one was to, of course, honor George W. Crockett Jr., who was an outstanding, our own giant here in Detroit. in and of itself. He was an outstanding civil rights lawyer, jurist, and congressperson. He served in all three capacities here in out of Detroit. As an attorney, he was a vice president of the National Lawyers Guild, very progressive bar association within the legal community, and in fact established one of the first integrated law firms in the country. As a jurist, he was elected, I think, to the Recorder's Court in 1966, and again, was very courageous in terms of what he did. There was an incident at New Bethel Baptist Church where a police officer was killed. There was a meeting at that time of the Republic of New Africa. The police, all white, came in, stormed the church, arrested juveniles, everyone in the church, detained them. George Crockett was called. He opened the police precinct gym, made it a courtroom. He says the courtroom is wherever I am, and proceeded to dismiss these cases against 130 of the people who were incarcerated. That's how courageous George Crockett was. And as a congressman, he introduced a resolution in Congress to free Nelson Mandela from South Africa. So in and of itself, a very giant in terms of his work and his attitude and his progressiveness. And then the third reason was to really connect the community with black attorneys. It's important that we partner with the Wolverine Bar Association because it allowed us to bring forth a number of talent, in order to be able to communicate to our community and show them there were black attorneys who were in our city, who were competent, skilled, and ready and available to serve them. So those are the reasons why I established this community law school, and certainly glad that 28 years later it still exists. My congratulations to and my thanks to the Detroit branch for continuing this invaluable asset to the community, and certainly Lori Moore, who was with me from the very beginning and encouraged us to do this and helped us actually pull together all the materials 28 years ago when we did this. So thank you, Lori. So that's the reason why we're here, and certainly I hope now you will enjoy what you're about to hear next. Again, just a continuation of the mission of this community law school. Thank you for this opportunity to give you some history and certainly welcome those who are here today for this session.
Good morning, good morning. My name is Richard Mack, the chair of the Legal Redress Committee with the Detroit branch NAACP. And we again welcome you to another very engaging session for the George Crockett Community Law School. Thank you again, John Johnson, for spearheading this over so many years ago. I actually remember I joined the branch must have been 1995 or 6, and then the law school back in 98. I remember serving under John, working with John and Lori and all the rest. So I'm actually old, y'all. Wow. I know, right? So we are going to start off today with the program. So make sure to get your pens and pads out. It's always important for us to make sure that the members of the public are informed and retain the information that we give you, both those of you here and those online. We're going to start talking about what constitutes a civil rights violation. Americans with Disabilities Act, Employment Rights, and Disability Rights. And we have some dynamic people who are going to start off with various presentations. The first one that I have on my list is someone that I know quite well, who I used to work with before she found a new home. Her name is Attorney Jocelyn Flemings, and let me give you a little bit about her. She's an attorney. She currently works with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. She used to work at the law firm Miller Corn, where I'm partnered, so John stole her from us. And she provides legal guidance to on various civil rights statutes. Graduated from University of Detroit Mercy back in 2010, and then started working in the classroom, but decided to go to law school. and then she did that and got her Juris Doctorate in 2021, and of course worked with us, and then now is working with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, and it's just very, very in tune. One of the things that I always love about Jocelyn is how passionate she feels about the people that she represents, or the people she gives advice to. She literally calls them part of her family, and she just wants to make sure that she's doing everything she can to help our people. So without further ado, let me bring to you Jocelyn Fleming. Oh, and yeah, I forgot about it. We're also bringing up at the same time, both of y'all come on up, it's my mistake, her new boss, Elena Buford Kamerman. She is the director of the Office of Legal Affairs within the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. She has a bachelor's degree with honors in anthropology and political science. Oh, I got political science too. How about that? And not anthropology, that's a whole nother level of science right there. For Bard College, and then she passed bar magna cum laude at Michigan State University College of Law in 2016, and before becoming a civil sergeant, she was a distinguished civil litigator in both state and federal courts, and then she joined State Bar of Michigan in April of 2021, and then she's now at Michigan Department of Civil Rights, where she advises enforcement teams on cases that they progress through investigation, conciliation, resolutions, and all the rest. And so, without further ado, I'll bring you both of them at the same time, attorneys Buford Kamerman and Fleming. Thank you.
Well, good morning. All right, are all of these mics on? Honestly, I'll just. No.
Hello. Yes.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go. All right. Well, good morning. Thank you again for that introduction, Richard. We greatly appreciate it. I just want to give a little bit of background about myself. So, as mentioned, I joined the state of Michigan in terms of civil service back in 2021. Prior to that, in my civil litigation background, I handled all types of cases, right? Everything from those traffic court cases to family law, medical malpractice, excessive force cases, search warrants, things like that, right? I was a jack of all trades but master of none. And in 2021, when the pandemic was at its deepest, kind of darkest point, I realized, what did I want my legacy to be, right? In service of a firm, right? Just trying to get the billable hours, or something larger. And at that point, I was like, you know what? It's time to dedicate to the public, dedicate where I found my heart, especially because my grandmother was so influential for me in being a pioneer for civil rights back in our hometown. She was the head of her union, the first Black woman to do so, and she had just passed, and I wanted to honor her legacy. And so I've always found it to be a privilege to be able to come here and come back and give back, right? I am also, too, a product of the Wolverine Bar Association summer internship program, class of 2015. And it's just full circle, right? You always got to reinvest, give back to what poured into you. So thank you all again for this opportunity to allow the department to come, give a little bit of insight. And with that, too, Jocelyn, I want you to be able to speak your truth and let everybody know how awesome and wonderful you are as well. You want to give a little introduction?
Yep. Well, I am wonderful. I will co-sign that.
Yes, you are.
But,
Yes, you are.
But I'm just going to say that I've been with the department. I actually just started this year. I started in February, and I am honored to actually be able to be here and represent the department at this event. I don't take it lightly, and I am appreciative of my boss for allowing me to be here with her. She is my boss, so she probably going to, like, if I say something wrong, she will jump in and correct me. And that's all good, and I love it, and I'm just proud to be here to be able to represent the department alongside with Alana. And that's all I really need to say. Other than we hope that you all get something out of this presentation that you can actually put to use and benefit you. That's what we're here for, to serve. So I hope that you get that from what we're about to give you.
All right. Well, with that, I know we have some slides. Not a problem. Not a problem. So. worries. No worries. I wish I knew how to do stand-up comedy, but I'm not that.
Well, I have a joke. No, just kidding. I will get myself in trouble. I won't be invited back, so I'm going to be quiet. Richard, you were not helping.
I can tell y'all, though, we know this material good enough. We don't need the slides. Because we do this work day in and day out. Mhm. And does this clicker work? All right, we're going to give it a. All right, so we got this clicker. I don't know, we're going to see. Yep, it sure does. Wonderful. So we can get started here. So with any presentation, we always like to start with an agenda for our audience to be able to use as a roadmap. So you know where we're going, know where we're at, and kind of know where we're going to end up. So first thing we're going to do today is talk a little bit about the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. What's our vision, what's our mission, and how we go about accomplishing the work that we do to enforce and secure the equal protections of civil rights here in the state of Michigan. Then we'll dive into state and federal disabilities civil rights laws, note what they cover, and then we're going to specifically go into employment issues. What are some of the legal theories there? And then how does the department utilize those legal theories in order to filter them onto a certified complaint, right? How do we see those show up? What are violations? We're additionally going to talk a little bit about some important information for both employers and employees, resources that are available to you. Additionally, what resources from MDCR are available? What types of trainings are provided to the public? And then we would kindly ask, though, that all questions and answers be saved till the end, right? If you got them as we're going through, please jot them down, and we will make sure we have a dedicated Q&A time to address those questions. So, what about MDCR? Let's do a little bit of an introduction. The Michigan Department of Civil Rights has a very specific mission, and that is to investigate alleged discrimination and secure the equal protections of civil rights for all individuals. And I really always love to hone in on that last word there, individuals, right? Civil rights protections are not for just Michiganders. They're not just for citizens or documented immigrants. They are for each and every individual who finds themselves within the state of Michigan, okay? Now, in order to enact this mission, to do it, there is a specific vision involved, right? And that is to limit discrimination and promote equity through engagement, education, and enforcement, right? To be the voice of civil rights in Michigan. And you have to have all three of those, the engagement, education, and enforcement, right? Enforcement's that last line of defense. We want people to be engaged with their civil rights, learn about their civil rights, be preemptive, right? Because the best way to prevent a problem is to get ahead of it, right? Be proactive. And so those are two very important parts of it. But if somebody messes up, that's where we step in, right? That's where we toe the line and say, we're going to enforce these. If there's a violation, we're going to enforce it. So a little bit of history. back in 1964, Michigan became the very first state, right? I love that. Michigan's always been a pioneer when it comes to civil rights. Was the very first state to institute within its constitution civil rights protections. And specifically, if you're a legal nerd like me, I always love to put a citation on it. You'll find this in our Michigan Constitution at Article 5, Section 29. And what that particular portion of our Constitution did was create the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, which is an 8-member body where the individuals are appointed by the governor in order to address specific civil rights issues. But that's a lot of work for just 8 people, right, for a whole state. So following year, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights was created, it was instituted, and it was done so through statute in order to be the operational arm of the commission, right? At the department, we do that day-to-day work of taking in allegations of civil rights violations, of going out to the public, doing community engagement, as well as training and educational efforts about civil rights. And so specifically, you'll find the department's powers, authorities, how we're able to do the work we'll do, instituted, codified in law within the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, which we affectionately at the department called ELCRA, as well as the Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act. And that we still don't have a fun, affectionate name for. We kind of just used all of the letters PWDCRA, so if anybody comes up with a great acronym, please let me know, because that's always a lot to say. So.
Hello? Okay, we're gonna hop into the laws and what the department actually enforces. I'm gonna talk about the state laws specifically, the PWDCRA that Alana just talked about, and the Person with Disability Civil Rights Act, the PWDCRA, it is a mouthful, specifies that a person with a disability must be reasonably accommodated for purposes of employment, public service, and public accommodation, education, and housing. So just to elaborate a little bit on those 5 areas that are impacted by this particular statute, they collectively cover pretty much everything. Employment, of course, that's the workplace. We're going to get into more detail into employment specifically shortly, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. But I also want you to understand that public service, that includes things like when you go to the Secretary of State, all state facilities and like commissions, even our department, we are a part of public service. Then we have public accommodation. That's all businesses, entertainment, refreshment. That's the person who's selling you the hot dog, all the way up until when you go to the Fox Theater. So it covers pretty much everything. And education, those are things like schools, colleges, where we are, Wayne County Community College District, it would fall under education. And then housing, all things real estate and property related. So this statute is far-reaching. It covers all 5 of those areas. And what the statute does is it prohibits discrimination against an otherwise qualified individual with a disability. The statute also prohibits retaliation against an individual for exercising rights under the PWDCRA or assisting others in doing so. That means, yes, you are protected from discrimination if you have a disability and you're qualified, but that also means if someone who doesn't have a disability, but they speak up or on behalf of someone in support of their rights, you're protected too from against retaliation. So the law covers you as well. All right, so now we're gonna hop into specifically a little bit more information about employment. So when it comes to employment and the discrimination protections, employers, the people who are prohibited from discriminating, they're prohibited from retaliation, it includes employers, it includes employment agencies, and labor organizations. In our state, our PWDCRA is very broad. For employers, it covers everybody who has at least 1 employee. So that's one employee, that's everybody. So our statute is broader than the federal comparator, which Alana is going to talk to you a little bit more about shortly. And when we're thinking about employment specifically and where this law applies, it's not just your typical work setting. It's also apprenticeships and on-the-job training. So it doesn't matter if you're getting paid necessarily. Apprenticeships and on-the-job training and retraining programs are covered by the statute, and they too should be free from discrimination. If they're not, it's a violation of this law, and that's something that we can help with. All right, still staying with employment. When it comes to job posting notices and applications, employers cannot create, publish, or post job notices or applications that indicate a preference, limitation, specification, or discrimination against any applicant based solely upon disability status. Employers also cannot inquire about or attempt to elicit information about an individual's disability during the job application process, and employers cannot create or keep any records or disclose any information about an applicant's disability for discriminatory purposes.
All right, so let's touch a little bit then about our federal counterpart, which is known as the ADA, right? The Americans with Disabilities Act. So this act went into effect back in 1990, again, about 30 years after Michigan already had it on the books, right? Like I said, we are a trailblazer when it comes to civil rights. The ADA finally went into effect, 1990, and you'll see on the right of this slide is a picture of the president at the time, George H.W. Bush, signing the ADA and with it going into effect. And it's a comprehensive civil rights law as well, and it covers various areas. Title I, which is title meaning essentially this section of that law, covers employment. Title II covers state and local government, so that's the equivalent of a public service. Title III, places of public accommodation. Title IV, telecommunications, and Title V, miscellaneous provisions. And so essentially, the federal government was catching up with us, right? Catching up with Michigan in that it was providing a law to individuals with disabilities and ensuring that they have the same rights and equitable opportunities as those without. And what's interesting too, right, like Jocelyn mentioned, right, our PWDCRA is much more broader, right? That threshold there when it comes to that Title I section, that employment section, for our state statute, it's just one employee. For the civil rights law on the federal side, though, you have to have at least 15 in order to become within their jurisdiction. So even if you're worried, hey, maybe if the ADA doesn't apply, we're gonna make sure at MDCR, right? So long as they're employing you, that's one employee, that means it applies, right? So under Title I of the ADA, employers are prohibited from similar things, right? They can't discriminate against qualified individuals with disabilities in the hiring, firing, promoting, how they pay you, how they provide job training opportunities, or any other aspect of employment, right? And so that's very broad. Aspect of employment could mean, hey, maybe somebody gets a company car, but you don't, right? Maybe it could be where the offices are, where mandatory meetings are being held. Is it accessible to all individuals? Maybe somebody with who's utilizing a wheelchair cannot, right? It means all aspects of employment. That's a very broad phrase that we use to try and stretch protections as far as possible. Additionally, employers must provide a reasonable accommodation for any qualified applicant or employee with a known disability. And additionally, Title I also applies to private employers, state and local governments, employment agencies, labor organizations, and labor management. And so sometimes too, it's also good to note, right? This is all aspects of employment. So yes, you're a direct employer under the ADA, but also too, right? Labor organizations, that means your unions also have to comply as well. And we find this protection, as Jocelyn mentioned, also available in our state law as well. So how do they get in trouble, right?
Okay, so now we're gonna talk about what happens when you come to the department with potential employment issues and violations. So this is legal theories. I'm about to get into it, but before I get into it, I just want to be clear. You don't have to understand everything that I'm about to talk about. We're going to talk about it because we're here to educate. We want you to understand the legal theories. But when you come to the department, what you come to us with are your issues, what has happened to you, your story, the facts to support your story, all of that. And we are going to take that and we're going to analyze it and figure out if it fits one of these legal theories that would make it applicable under the law. So again, you don't have to understand everything I'm about to talk about, but we're going to talk about it. Only thing you need to understand is if you feel like you have an issue that might be a violation of your civil rights, you need to come to us so that we can help you, and we're going to do this. So, with that being said, and I hope understood, we're going to talk about our legal theories. The first one and the most common one we see is disparate treatment. That's when the employer treats a person with a disability less favorably than others. We also have the theory of disparate impact. That's when employers' facially neutral policy or practice unfairly harms persons with disabilities. And we're going to have a couple samples or examples that are going to come up in a few more slides to give you a little bit more clarity for these. Failure to reasonably accommodate, that's also a very common one that we see. And with this, the employer refuses to make a reasonable accommodation for a qualified employee or applicant with a disability. I believe these slides are going to be provided to you. And within the slides, my wonderful boss has embedded hyperlinks. And the hyperlinks give you more information about the legal theories. And we have two more. Retaliation is also a common one. And with retaliation, the employer takes a negative action against an employee or applicant because they complained about a discriminatory practice, they filed a charge of discrimination, or they helped someone else in doing so. This is the one I was talking about earlier where you're covered even if you don't have a disability. If you help someone or you supported someone in an investigation and you've been retaliated against, the law protects you as well. And then the last one I'm going to talk to you about is harassment. And with harassment, the employer allows unwelcome conduct based on a protected class, creating an abusive, intimidating, or a hostile atmosphere. For this to qualify under law, the conduct must be either a condition of continued employment or severe or pervasive. I'm going to get a little bit into this because I want you all to understand that all harassment is not prohibited by law. It is harassment that is based off what is considered a protected class or a protected activity. And here we're talking about disability. So we do have some examples that are going to come up, but a condition of continued employment for now, we can define that as you told your boss about it, or you told someone who at the job about it, but nothing was done. So you are being subjected to harassment just by virtue of keeping your job. Nothing has been done and you've spoken out about it. Severe or pervasive, those are some heavy legal terms that I don't want to get too far into because it will give us all a tailspin. And I want you to leave here with an understanding, not confusion. But I will say that severe things that are considered when you analyze severe are who is doing the harassment. Is it the boss? Is it your colleague? It makes a difference. Where was the harassment taking place? Was it in a setting like this where it was public and everybody saw it? Was it just between two people? It makes a difference. Was the harassment something that physically intimidated someone or you? That makes a difference. Those are some of the things that are factored into the analysis for severe. Pervasive, there are several factors, but the most significant one is how often something happens. So how often were you subjected to the harassment? And again, all of those theories we just talked about, you don't have to understand everything. Just understand that if you have an issue, or you have a concern, and you think your civil rights have been violated, you need to come to us.
And there are additional resources about harassment as well in the hyperlink on this slide too. Again, come reach out to us, right? Not everything can be considered harassment, but if you bring it to us, we can help you figure out, is this a potential violation of civil rights law?
All right, so some of the things we see a lot are issues concerning demotion, discharge, discipline, constructive discharge, failure to hire or rehire, failure to accommodate disability, failure to promote, transfer, hostile environment, layoffs, other terms and conditions, and unequal wage. Those are issues that come to the department by wonderful people who look to us to do what we do, which is enforce civil rights. So bring those issues to us if you feel like they fit.
Yeah, right, and I think what's really cool too is, right, all those legal theories, we take those in, we train the staff at the department to understand them, to know them, so that they can analyze them, right, and assign what's the appropriate issue, right? What's the harm that you are potentially experiencing, so that we can initiate the investigation and look to enforce and secure civil rights. So With that, some potential violations or some examples include refusing to hire someone solely because they disclose that they're an individual with a disability. You could also, or employers could also get in trouble for refusing to provide reasonable accommodations, for example, such as American Sign Language interpreters or screen readers. Additionally, calling somebody out of their name in reference to their disability, so use of derogatory language or offensive conduct based on that disability is also a violation.
A few more include hosting a mandatory meeting at an inaccessible location, which prevents an employee with a disability from accessing the location. So that actually could be disparate impact. That's one of the legal theories we talked about. Taking adverse employment action against an employee or applicant for opposing discrimination, participating in an investigation, or filing a complaint. That could be retaliation. That's another one of the legal theories. But again, we'll do that. We'll analyze that on your behalf. Just come to us if you have a concern. The last one, requiring a medical examination of an applicant prior to a conditional job offer. I can imagine fact patterns where that could be disparate impact or it could be disparate treatment. But, come with your concerns. Again, we're going to figure out the legal theories and if they apply and if you're covered under the statute.
Yeah, and I definitely want to touch on that, right? What I also love about the law and the legal endeavor is that you can always find new perspectives on things, right? Try and find ways to stretch and provide the broadest protections. And I know when we were rehearsing, right, Jocelyn and I were looking at these, and yeah, thinking about this fourth bullet point, hosting a mandatory meeting at an inaccessible location. There are actually a potentially couple more issues I would say could potentially arise. But it's always a very specific, right? I want to be sure people know every case is unique. The department evaluates each case on its merits. So if, for example, we have something like this where an employer is hosting a mandatory meeting at an inaccessible location, so that means their employee can't actually physically get to that location. Well, that's a neutral policy, right? Mandatory meetings, everybody has to show up, but there's an impact on somebody who can't get there. But what if they then report it and say, hey, I can't get to this meeting, can I have an accommodation? Could I potentially, attend via Zoom instead? But they say, no, that's a failure to accommodate, right? And then, so always, always, always know we're always looking for the broadest stretch of the law, because it could be one action can give rise to more than one type of harm, right? Just, again, bring everything, right? Don't hold anything back. The more you can tell us, the more informed we can be, the better we can be at assisting in that enforcement process. So what's some important information for both employers, right? If you're a small business owner, a big business owner, as well as employees, right? The people who work there. So for employers, right, the best way to address things is to make sure that they're not happening up front, right? The best way you can save your money is to not have an issue, right? Don't get caught up in litigation. So in order to avoid that, some best practices for employers are to, one, ensure that all aspects of the employment process are accessible to individuals with disabilities, right? Doesn't just mean when the person has their first day. This means when you're posting that job description, right? You're using inclusive language. This means all the way up to the firing, right? That you're firing them for a performance-based issue or not any non-discriminatory reason, right? Not necessarily just when that person walks in the door, from the moment you post for that job up until when you fire them, right? Everything. Ensure the entire process is non-discriminatory and accessible to individuals with disabilities. Additionally, work to designate a point person when it comes to ADA compliance, right? If you don't have an HR department, make sure you have an ADA compliance expert, somebody who works day in and day out, because somebody who's trained and educated can make sure that you avoid mistakes before they happen. Additionally, be intentional about developing a reasonable accommodation policy and making sure all people know about it, right? Your employees, to how do they request an accommodation? Who do they go to? How do they submit the relevant information? To the people who are also making those decisions and providing them, right? Ensure that all your managers and staff are trained to recognize what is a request for an accommodation. Because a lot of times, and this is where we see some people mess up quite often, is they think the person has to use this magic word or magical legal phrase, I need a reasonable accommodation. That is not the case, right? So long as you're aware that there's an individual with a disability who needs an adjustment to the workplace, that's a request for a reasonable accommodation. And your staff should be trained to know that triggers the interactive process. And when I say interactive process, what that means is the process in figuring out what is that person's reasonable accommodation that can be provided. And this is probably the most important part. Train all of the managers and supervisors on how to prevent workplace discrimination, right? Invest in the people and invest in the culture that you're cultivating within the workforce, right? If people are inclusive and if they're intentional about making sure that discrimination is not happening, you're going to be ahead of the game. So if you would like some additional resources, again, we have some hyperlinks in the slide here. There's some EEO resources for employers, and in a few slides, we're going to talk about what types of trainings MDCR provides to this effect.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so for employees, so Lana just talked about employers, what you can do. Employees, what you can do is know your rights. Come out to things like this, learn, educate yourself, and when you have an issue, contact us. But employees with disabilities, please know, understand you have a right to a workplace free from discrimination based on disability. You have a right to equal pay for equal work. You have a right to reasonable accommodations. You have a right to privacy regarding your medical and disability-related information. And you have a right to report discrimination without retaliation. So if you have a concern about any of these things, you come to us. We're here to serve. This is what we do, and this is what your tax money pays for. So get your benefits. And we have a link for employees. If you have an issue that you want to learn more before you contact us, you don't have to. But if you want to learn more before you contact us, that's a link that you can use and find out more information about what I just talked about, which is your rights.
So MDCR does provide significant amount of trainings to this effect. So at our department, we provide a best practices for inclusive hiring and employment training. So that's geared primarily towards employers, right? How do you make sure your entire employment process is actually inclusive? Additionally, there's trainings about state and federal disability civil rights laws, which is a really good primer to make sure to know what do I have to be compliant with as an employer. And then finally, a cultural competency training. So this really addresses the harassment type of issues, right? How to make sure that the environment in your workplace is in fact inclusive and not harassing somebody, especially on the basis of their disability. So if you would like to know more about those, we have wonderful QR codes here. They're also printed out on the slides too. For filing well, I should say, we have multiple ways you can reach the department. We like to be accessible as possible. So if you want to call us, call us. If you want to walk up, stroll on up. We got offices in Detroit, Lansing. We actually have one up in Marquette. I don't know if anybody wants to go all the way up there this time of year, but that's okay. Grand Rapids and Flint. Additionally, we have a 1-800 number that's right here. Or you can visit our website, michigan.gov/MDCR. We also have a very new, wonderful portal program that has been launched, which is another way to file online if you would prefer. And if you want information about any of these online, you can find a QR code for filing a complaint, a QR code for requesting a training, as well as just more information about MDCR generally, if you would like. But with, I guess, we'll leave this up here for a little bit if anybody wants the QR codes. But with that, I'd say we're ready for questions. Yes, Director Johnson. Wait for the mic.
Fine presentation, very
Thank you.
thorough. Could you explain to our audience the exact role of MDCR in the enforcement process?
Yes, definitely. So MDCR, right, we're a public service. We are here to enforce and secure the protections of civil rights within the state of Michigan, but specifically to be clear, right, that's on behalf of the public, right? Individuals come to us with their concerns, but to be clear, right, we're not anybody's individual attorney, anybody's individual investigator. We prosecute civil rights violations on behalf of the public as a whole. So we are a resource, and we're a place where you can bring your concerns and they can be addressed. But if you want someone to specifically be your advocate, somebody who's for you, that is something you would have to seek with a private attorney, right? So you might want to call Mac over there. In that regard.
Thank you. That does clarify the fact we're a neutral agency. We're a law enforcement agency. So we're investigating these matters as a neutral party, determining where the facts lie. The other one is explain how these laws affect people with mental health challenges. We focused on physical disabilities. How about mental health challenges?
Yeah, so mental or any disability related to mental health, that has just as much protection as any physical manifestation disability. So within our statute, there's no distinction, right? It has the same amount of protections. If anything, it's just about, or what would come to maybe a dispositive part of a case, so a determining factor in a case for when it comes to mental disabilities or related to disabilities, or in those types of cases, is the knowledge of it, right? Because those are types of disabilities that aren't seen or readily observed. And so part of what we would have to prove in those cases is how did the employer, or who we would call the respondent, know about the disability in order to actually be able to take a harmful action based on that, right? Because we always have to connect the hurt to the protected class status, the hurt to you being an individual with a disability. That's what makes it a civil rights violation, is that connection between your protected class status and that harm you experienced.
Question. Sometimes we find that the courts try to undermine the purpose of the law. And in that respect, I'm wondering if you could talk a little about the distinction between a disability and a limitation. As to, because we often see that people have limitations, but the courts have tried to say that's not a disability. You understand where I'm going?
I don't know where you're going, but I can tell you what the law says. So when it comes to the law, right, at least within our PWDCRA, I'm going to focus on our state statute. It defines disability as a determinable physical or mental characteristic that originates from either a disease, congenital defect, what have you. And in the area of employment, it has to substantially impact a person's life, right? So there's a very, as well as be unrelated to the qualifications for the job performance, right? Again, you have to be a qualified individual as well as an individual with a disability. But to that point, in looking at the law, it's a very subjective definition. That means it's very unique to the individual, right? How does it manifest in their life? And the best person in any case, in order to be able to articulate that, is that individual with a disability, right? They're the ones who can say, this is how this diagnosis manifests in my life, impacts my life in a way that is unique to me. Because not only that, not every diagnosis, even though it's the same on paper, manifests in the same way, right? Somebody with asthma, right, could go for a 5K and be fine, right, so long as they got their inhaler. Somebody else, they walk into one dusty room and then all of a sudden you got the ambulance rolling up, right? Same diagnosis technically, but totally manifest in two different ways. So to that point, yes, the courts try to limit it, but it's always about how do you prove it, and the best way to prove it is be able to articulate how that manifests in your life. And if you have a doctor's note or something that can support it, that's great, but that to me is always the best evidence, right? That individual, because that's what the statute recognizes as the definition of disability.
A question about, can you all go through the right to sue process? So they file a claim with NDCR or the federal equivalent EEOC, and then they get a right to sue. Can you just kind of walk through how does an individual end up in court after going to your agency?
So the right to sue process is unique to EEOC when it comes to MDCR. you always have the right and ability to go to the court should you see fit, right? If that's what's best for you. Now, I do want to make sure we're aware of what's that impact then if you have a case with MDCR. If you have a case with MDCR and you choose to go file in court, we will administratively close the case, because whatever the court says, that's going to bind whatever the department determination is. So it's not efficient or effective for us to expend those resources, come to a determination if the court's already going to resolve that matter. So note that when it comes to MDCR, you can always go whenever you feel free to or feel fit to. You don't have to wait for a letter from us. We just ask that if you do, let us know so we can resolve the case within our department and you can continue to pursue your rights in court.
Good morning.
Oh.
I just came in. I apologize for being late, but it says up here filing the complaint in person. Ooh, can you hear me? I could talk loud. But basically, I want to ask, when you file a complaint on the local level, I'm not sure if you talked about that already, but with an agency that's supposed to be protective of the individual with a disability, and they're supposed to have the responsibility of investigating agencies that get paid to help those with disabilities, and they themselves are actually corrupt, and they have a conflict of interest. Who do you go to? So basically what I'm saying is as if you go to the police department, they're supposed to protect the rights of the individuals, the safety of the public, but that particular investigation has been corrupted by dirty cops or whatever. So this is what I'm talking about, so you can get an idea. So who do we go to that monitors that agency that is corrupt, the appeal had to go through that agency and they stood on their appeal. And so now who do we go to that investigates that local agency if they're corrupt?
All right, so you said a lot. I'm gonna try to unpack it, and my boss is gonna back me up if I say something wrong. Okay, so when you're dealing with the police are a public service. So it depends on what we're talking about specifically. So if they violated civil rights, they violated someone's civil rights while they were interacting, then you can report that to us. We are an independent agency. We can do an investigation to see if your civil rights were violated. That means you were discriminated against by the police based off your race, your age, all those protected based disability. That's what we're talking about. You can come to us. We would be the department to enforce that. If you talked about, you kind of got into court proceedings and judgments. Now that one,
You want me to?
because we don't overturn judgment. So the issue cannot be the judgment, but the issue is that your attorney, treated you differently based off your race. That's different. We can look at that. So it really depends on. We cover our statutes cover public service. They cover public accommodations. So it covers it if it's a violation of civil rights. But we have to unpack it because, again, what you said could hit a lot of different ways. And it's maybe some stuff we can enforce, but we have to know the facts. So if there's an actual fact pattern to go with that, you would come to our department, you would tell us what the facts are, and we will decipher it and see what legal theories apply, if any at all. So we enforce civil rights. So if the issue is civil rights, come to us. I hope I didn't confuse things. I wasn't trying to. I did. I apologize. She's going to clean it up.
No, that's okay, though, right? Because we're all here to learn, right? So the first thing is, you talked about an internal investigation, I heard, too, right? We wouldn't interject in their investigation, right? But what we would do is, like Jocelyn said, if law enforcement agencies are a public service, if you came to us with alleged violations of your civil rights based on whatever protected class status, we would evaluate that and make a determination as to if one of those legal issues apply. So in the area of public service, that could mean unequal service or failure to accommodate potentially, denied service, things of that nature. Connect it again to your protected class status and then initiate an investigation there, right? And so we would look at, did their conduct treat you differently, right, or provide service in an unequitable way, deny you the full and equal enjoyment of that service because of, right? And that's the key phrase, because of a protected class status. So you can still come to our department with those allegations. We would still be happy to investigate, right, what that action was. Now, like Jocelyn said, if there was already a court order or an opinion issued in a particular case, the department can't overrule something a court issued, right? That's part of our separation of powers, right? We have our executive branch, our judicial branch, and our legislative branch. The department is a part of the executive branch, so we don't override what a court has already said. But if there's no court, okay. Okay, so, okay, and it's okay, because it's a little bit of distance too, right, in hearing. So what I would say in regards to that is, if you're saying there's an independent agency, then that's more of a public accommodations concern. But that's still covered by the statute, right? And you can take those allegations to the department to investigate. Now, I would love to connect with you a little bit more later on, just to make sure. So this information is how multiple things. One here, this blue QR code, is about filing a complaint. And so that's an access, or that's a resource accessible to you today, right? And then during our office hours, right, you can come into one of our offices. We have one in Detroit at the Cadillac Building, Lansing, Grand Rapids, Flint, or Marquette as well. But you can also call this number here or go online, okay? So please know, but again, please feel happy to connect one-on-one, and we can get you directed to appropriate staff to evaluate those concerns. And I thought I saw a couple, but there were one more. I'm sorry, he said one. I didn't say one. I'd take all the questions I could.
Can you address the at will when there's no union there, and they keep saying they have a right to let you go because we have an at will process? Can you?
Yeah, for sure. So that sounds like a discharge concern, right? Firing, right? Termination of employment. So Michigan, by default, if there are no policies or procedures in place, is called an at-will employment state, right? Which means an employer can let you go at their will, essentially at their leisure. Now, what's prohibited by our statutes is that they can't let you go at any time because of a protected class status, right? So that means if they fired you because of disability, right? Because of your status as an individual with a disability. If they fired you because of your race, your age, bless you, your sex, right? If they fired you for those reasons, that's a violation of the statute. So even though you're an at-will, you still have those protections. And what we would do in the investigation is follow up, right? Ask for the documentation. Well, why did you let this person go, right? Well, just at will, well, that's not enough, right? We dig deep into these cases to figure out what's the reason, right? Now, no, too, like Director said, we're a law enforcement agency. We don't represent either one side. We don't represent a claimant, who is the individual with the discrimination allegations, or the respondent, which in that case would be the employer, right? The one who's defending. So there is still a burden of proof, right? A duty to prove your case in providing evidence, right? So that's part of what we do in that investigation process, is work to gather that evidence, right? Through questions, asking you for any documentation you may have, and then make that assessment on, was there a violation?
Let's give it up for Alana and Johnson. Very thorough presentation. There we go. Very thorough presentation. Appreciated a lot of how detailed they got into the law. And continuing to emphasize again that you're not expected to be legal experts in these things. I think that's important, just to give you a framework. Next, we are going to talk about this caregiver rights and the rights to with respect to giving care for those that are in need. And we have someone who's very acclaimed to present to you Lori Sanders. She is currently the Chief Executive Officer of the Disability Network, Wayne County, Detroit. And I just, you have it in your materials here, but I just thought this vision just really leaped out at me. A community that values disability as a human diversity free of attitudinal barriers, where all people benefit with full access and inclusion. And that's very, very important, especially in all of what we see going on in today's day and age, making sure that everyone has access to all of the spaces and the benefits that we have. Before she was in that role, she was Executive Director of Taylor Reading Course. She's currently an adjunct professor at Wayne County Community College. She was another Executive Director for the Urban Services Development Organization. And she also, prior to that, was a daycare program, person who ran the daycare program. And so we just want to offer Ms. Lori Sanders to come before you to talk about caregiver rights. Let's give it up for her.
Good morning. I'm Lori Hill Sanders, the Executive Director, CEO of the Disability Network of Wayne County, Detroit. The Disability Network is a center for independent living. That is an organization that is operated and designed by people with disabilities to serve individuals with disabilities. So what that essentially says is over 65% of my staff, including myself, have disabilities. Sometimes there are invisible disabilities where you don't actually see that the person has a disability. Typically, we think of disability as a person that may be in a wheelchair, a person that is visually impaired, or an individual that may be hearing impaired, but there are a lot of invisible disabilities. So I just want to state that. The Disability Network of Wayne County, Detroit, we have 5 core services that we provide, that being information and referral, advocacy, peer support, independent living skill development, and transitions. So I'm just going to keep, or should I wait? So our mission at the Disability Network is to empower, educate, and advocate for individuals with disabilities while promoting independent living, inclusion, and accessible pathways. Who is a caregiver? A caregiver provides assistance to another person unable to fully care for themselves due to age, disability, or an illness. Types of caregivers are family caregivers, which are unpaid. However, there are resources through the Department of Health and Human Services where family members can be paid to provide care for their family members based on the individual that you're providing care, their eligibility, and their income. So family members can be paid for providing caregiving for their family members. The other type of caregiver is a personal care attendant. That individual is actually paid to provide care. There are respite or agency caregivers, and those are paid caregivers as well. And there's also veteran-directed or self-directed care providers that provide care. The importance of caregivers. Caregivers are the backbone of independent living. They're the backbone of independent living because Caregivers allow individuals with disabilities to be able to continue to live in their home independently and not have to be in a nursing home or in an institutionalized setting. So they're the backbone of independent living. Also, they provide emotional, physical, and social support. They enable individuals with disabilities to also remain in their homes and be active in their community. Disability Network recognizes caregivers as partners in the advocacy and empowerment arena. Caregiver rights. Every caregiver deserves respect and dignity, a safe working condition, fair pay, and clear expectations, training and support, rest and respite, and freedom from discrimination and harassment. Just speaking about respect and dignity. I have aged parents, and my mother has a caregiver. And before I go to work, typically every morning, I hear my mom downstairs with the caregiver, and I have to go downstairs and referee. So many times I have to tell my mom, you have to be humble. You have to humble yourself because, first of all, I'm going to have to leave here in the next 15 or 20 minutes. But, you know, even though someone is being paid to take care of you, there is a certain amount of respect that you should give that individual. So it's amazing. My mother is 88 years old, but I have to remind her every day that I'm getting ready to leave you here with the caregiver, and Mommy, you need to be nice. And sometimes she gets it, sometimes she doesn't, but I can honestly say that her caregiver is a very loving, passionate individual that enjoys doing what it is that she does for people. The caregiver needs to be in a safe working condition. I've gone into some homes and honestly have had to make referrals through adult protective services because not only was the home not safe for the caregiver to be in, it wasn't safe for the person that needed to care to be in as well. So the caregiver needs to be in a safe environment. Fair pay and clear expectations. Being a caregiver is just like any other employee. You need to I have to write a list for my mom's caregiver. I don't just expect her to know what to go in, what to do. She and I have discussions, we talk about it, so that she has a very clear idea of what she's gonna be doing that day with my mom. Training and support. At the Disability Network, we actually provide training and support for our caregivers. We have a caregiver certification program. And that's very important because if a caregiver is able to identify some things that may lead to a person needing to go to emergency or needing to go to the emergency to be admitted, that caregiver needs to be aware of some of those things. So that's why I think that the caregiver training certification is very important. And in our caregiver training program, we also offer our caregivers CPR, which is really, really important. So that additional training for caregivers, I think that's very important. And sometimes that training can alleviate an emergency call or a call where the person has to go back to the hospital. Okay. Now, in terms of talking about legal protection for caregivers, there is the Fair Labor Standards, that's the FLSA, that ensures minimum wage and overtime for caregivers. There is the Family and Medical Leave Act, and that is an act where if you are an employer and you need to go home and take care of your parents, or if you have a child that's ill or sick, your job will be protected based on that particular law, and that is the Family and Medical Leave Act. Then there's also, which these ladies have talked about earlier, the American with Disabilities Act. That is also something that protects against discrimination for caregivers. And then there is the Michigan Caregiver Protection Act, which is actually the official name for that is the Designated Caregiver Act. And what that act actually talks about is when an individual goes into the hospital has to allow that person time to identify who their caregiver is going to be. Very important. And with that act, the hospital has to contact that caregiver if anything is going wrong or if someone needs to be contacted about what the transition is, or if this person is going into another facility, that caregiver has to be contacted. Also, when the individual is discharged from the hospital is responsible for you to provide that caregiver with the discharge plan so that that caregiver knows how to continue taking care of that individual when they return back home. Now, the next slide talks about the Caregiver Bill of Rights. Well, in the state of Michigan, Michigan does not have a single Caregiver Bill of Rights. However, there are certain legislation pieces that allow that the caregiver to be treated with courtesy and respect, that the caregiver receives a clear care plan information, a caregiver can refuse an unsafe or an unreasonable task. Let me just give you an example of that. Some people may need someone that's able to transport an individual out of bed or into the wheelchair. A caregiver isn't necessarily equipped to be able to do all of that. So that requires a whole nother kind of person to be in that house that is trained to know how to do that kind of work. And that is typically, if that's something that that caregiver does not feel comfortable with, you have to be very specific in understanding that a caregiver, and let me say this, a caregiver is an individual that helps to assist with everyday living skills. Okay, that means helping the individual with their toileting, helping with preparing the food, helping with washing the clothes, helping with possibly going to the grocery market to pick up the groceries and bring them back to the home. A caregiver is not a CNA. A caregiver is not a nurse. So caregivers have to be very specific when they're coming into the home to make sure that it's understood. Those are not roles or responsibilities of a caregiver. So the key thing that you need to remember, and this is the right of the caregiver, that you are simply assisting with everyday living skills and chores, not medication passing out for the individual. There may be some certain things if the person has a trach. Those are not things that caregivers do. Caregivers assist with everyday living skills and those kind of chores. So that's very specific. So some of the things or the challenges that caregivers face, they face burnout and fatigue. They face financial strain because right now caregivers, they start at about $14. Some agencies will pay their caregivers $17 an hour, but I've had sometimes some caregivers that have come into my home to assist with my mom. They've said they're making $13.50, and that's pretty tough. If an agency is paying you $13.50, but yet they're making $37 an hour for you, and so it is a financial strain on individuals that are caregivers. A lot of times caregivers don't get the recognition that they should receive. and they're emotionally stressed, or they sometimes face isolation. And there's limited respite and support access for caregivers. That's one of the things that we do have at the Disability Network. We have a respite program, and that allows our caregivers to, if they need to go get their hair done for a couple hours, if they need to go to the movies, go to yoga or whatever, something that they can do some self-care for themselves. Respite is very important, and that is one of the services that we do provide at the Disability Network. Something else that we provide for our caregivers, we provide caregiver support. We have peer support meetings for our caregivers, and we also bring our caregivers in, and we're always trying to provide them with additional training and trying to help them to decide if this is a career that they want to go to, and actually providing them with the tools and the resources that they need so that they can possibly go into a CNA program, or we try to work with them and encourage them to go into a LP, licensed practical nurse program as well. So we know that higher education is the key. You can start out as a caregiver, but that is a career pathway where you can actually elevate yourself financially as another profession as well, starting with that. Next, okay, self-care for caregivers. You cannot pour from an empty cup, which means if you're not taking care of yourself, you certainly can't take care of other individuals. You have to set healthy boundaries for yourself. You have to prioritize your health as well. Stay socially connected, ask for help when you need it, and make sure that you're ensuring self-help for yourself. Use relaxation techniques and things of that nature. All right. Advocacy and action. Caregivers are advocates. Your voice matters. Report unsafe or unfair treatment. Participate in care planning. Join Disability Network of Wayne County, Detroit, Advocacy Network, and promote disability inclusion. All right, so that concludes disability rights for caregivers. Caregiver rights, I'm sorry about that. Are there any questions? Yes.
Guardianship versus caregiving.
Okay, so at the Disability Network, we're not, it's not part of our mission to advocate for guardianship or power of attorney, because our mission is to give individuals the tools that they need so that they can be independent on their own. So if you have a guardian or someone that has a power of attorney, it has a conflict of what our mission is as an organization. But let me say this. We have a nursing home transition program where individuals are transitioned out of the nursing home and back into the community. And a lot of those individuals come to us with a guardian already, but it's very rare that we as an organization deal with guardianship or powers of attorney, because it kind of diverts from what our actual mission is. Okay. Yes.
We hear so much today about abuses that occur to clients from caregivers. Does the Disability Network offer any sort of referral program or give maybe a grading list for whether they be individual caregivers or nursing homes or long-term care facilities, just so that people can go and figure out what's been rated highly, what's been rated not so high?
What we typically do, how we're involved with nursing homes is because we have a nursing home transition program. So what we're trying to do is to get the person out of the nursing home and get them into living independently on their own with a care provider. We have relationships with other organizations, particularly a strong relationship with our DAAA. So there are definitely ratings out there, but we're never trying to do referrals to get individuals into a nursing home. Our goal and our objective is to get them out of that situation. And also in terms of caregivers, we're very strong advocates for family members providing that care. So hopefully that's going to alleviate, what you may consider to be abuse of someone from an outside agency. But those are some of the things that we advocate for, is for family members to provide that care for their loved ones. Yes.
How do you determine, like, say, someone has 5 children, and how is it determined who becomes that parent's caregiver? Is there?
Okay. So with the Disability Network, we're a consumer-driven organization. We're consumer-driven, and when we do an assessment for you, it's client-centered. So what I mean by it's consumer-driven, if that mother or if that father says, I want the middle child to be my caregiver, we're going to advocate for that middle child, and we're going to do whatever it is that we need to do to make sure that middle child or whoever that consumer, and that's what we call our individuals, whoever that consumer has identified that that's who they want to provide their care for them, that's the one that we're going to advocate for and that we're going to support.
So how do you advocate for that person based on? I mean, what's the criteria? I guess that's the question.
Do you mean from someone that we're getting out, that's being transferred out of a nursing home, perhaps? So
So it's like, you said you're going to assess the person, you're going to advocate for them.
So when we go into the nursing home, we're going to do like a 12-page client center assessment with that individual. And at that time, that individual is going to state to us specifically, I have the older child, the middle child, or I have a niece, I have a goddaughter. That's who I want you to work with in terms of being my care person. And even if that individual was to say to us, it's very rare that we get those situations, but if that individual would say that I really want this person to be my guardian, we would actually work with that person to make sure that that would happen for them as well. But it's all based on what that caregiver wants. Mm-hmm.
What are the signs and criteria and questions you ask that person, not the client, not the parent? What do you ask? What are the questions you ask the person who possibly is going to be the caregiver?
I'm not the chosen one. What questions are we going to ask?
How do y'all, because the parent could say, I want this one, this is who I want. However, in hindsight, that person is not really qualified or stable. But you said you're advocating because the parent said, I want this child. So I'm asking you, how do you go about determining that?
We can't make that determination for our consumers. We wouldn't be able to make that determination for our
I
consumers.
was just asking what kind of questions you asked. Okay, I got you.
Wouldn't be able to make that determination for the consumer because the consumer, like I said, is consumer driven. And if that consumer was to say that she wanted that individual, that's the one that they're gonna work with to make sure. But let me just say this to you. There are certain, I don't actually do the community transition program, but when we do case reviews, my staff will share to me some of the concerns. There have been times when a staff has said that they had some concerns about the actual caregiver that the person had indicated. And then if you go into that home and you see that there are any issues or concerns, what we have to do is file a report with Adult Protective Services, and then let them go in there and do an investigation, and then support that Adult Protective Services as they're doing that investigation. So that's how we would do that. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hello, I wanted to ask you, we were referred to your agency, and wanted to know what type of training you offer the people who answer the phone at your agency and the supervisors that supervise them. We were referred, but we didn't get any help, so I want to know what kind of training they have.
Well, let me say this to you. As I mentioned, I think probably my opening statement is that we are a center for independent living, that my staff, probably 65% of my staff have disabilities. So I work with them sometimes one-on-one if I need to, but I say that to say that I have a very unique group of people that that work with the Disability Network, and that's because a lot of my staff, 65% of my staff, have disabilities. Yes, they do have training. What they're supposed to have, there's an IL philosophy, an independent living skill philosophy, that they're all trained on. There is an a disability network academy that all of them complete as well.
We have a question over here. No, more of. Okay. All right. I actually want to answer a few of the questions that people asked. One of them was about if there is a way to find out if there's a rating system for nursing homes or cares of that, things of that nature. While the state of Michigan does not have something like that, the federal government does. It's called the CMS, and it's specifically around Medicare and Medicaid. I'm a financial advisor for a living, so you can reach out to them for nursing homes specifically. There are other resources in terms of individual caretakers, things of that nature. None of them are necessarily federal or even state, but there are resources like AARP and other organizations that help seniors that can help you find the best care for your loved one. So those are available. The other question that you had was regarding power, well, essentially what you're asking about is power of attorney. So I'm the oldest of 5 kids, 5 different personalities. My mom knew certain kids are able to handle certain things. So for example, and this is something you can do for free. We've got somebody that's in charge of the health care power of attorney. They can make those difficult healthcare situations. Like, we all love mom, but if mom says, like, if she gets really sick and can't come back, she wants somebody that's going to do a do not resuscitate, right? Well, she knows that daughter's probably not going to be able to do it, but son can do it because it's what mom wants. So she puts that person in charge. Somebody else is good with finances, and other people are irresponsible. Maybe you put that in charge. What we've done is, so there's no arguing and complaining, is you can make people co-power of attorneys on things. So you have 2 for each one. Now, don't get more than 2 because it can be a mess. But these are things you can do, and it's called part of estate planning, which estate planning is something that is not for rich people, it's for everybody. And we'll talk more about that when I'm on the panel, but these are things that you want to have those tough conversations before mom or dad gets sick, before something happens, so that when you walk into that room, they've got the piece of paper in hand like, hey, mom's on the hospital bed, this is what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. There's no arguing. I don't want to hear it. That's what we need to do. Sometimes you need to be able to take the emotion out of it, and paperwork takes the emotion out of it for you and makes everybody safer. So that's what I had to say.
And just to go back to the young lady's question, because I have a very unique staff, I use a lot of compassion and a lot of love, because I'm certainly not going to be, if I can help it, be receiving something from EEOC, because I do have a challenging, unique, including myself, I'm unique too, but training, definitely training, and you know, sometimes the training just doesn't get processed. So it's a continuous process. But that's why when I open my statement, it's a Center for Independent Living, and that means it's a very unique staff. And that's the nature of the beast with the Center for Independent Living. Okay. And I also, you know, sometimes I have staff that they get a little bit swifty and they want to leave, and I will say to them, no other organization in the world is going to treat you like the Disability Network, because I have to embrace all of their disabilities, whether they're invisible or visible. And it takes a lot of love and a lot of compassion to meet the needs of my staff.
I just got a quick question. The certificate program that you talked about, I thought that was really great, and I didn't know you all offered that. So what are the fees associated with it, and how long is the training?
The training is actually a 6-week training. It meets once a week for 2 hours, and it's a virtual training. And there is no fee associated with that training. DAAA is one of our partners, and they fund us to be able to provide that training, as well as respite for our caregivers and individuals that need that particular service.
Okay, and the people who need respite, is that they have to be signed up with you and getting care services through you, or it's just anybody who's a caregiver? Because
they don't have to be. They don't have to be a caregiver that is with the organization. They can just call and say, "I'm a caregiver and I'm interested in receiving information about your respite program."
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give it up again for Ms. Lori Hill Sanders. Very thorough presentation. So as we wait on lunch, I don't have any jokes to tell, but what I thought we would do is I could talk a bit about when we had a very good presentation about civil rights and even caregiver rights. And I thought we could talk about it, how it meets brass tacks for those of you who have individual legal issues, some of the things you need to do to prepare for litigation and some of the things you need to do upon litigation. I don't know if, is this, you okay? Okay, good. So I don't have a slideshow for this, so, and you can absolutely interrupt me in the midst of this, but at the Miller Cohen firm, we get calls every day, Jocelyn remembers that, from people of all walks of life who are dealing with all different sorts of issues. Many of them, our specialty is employment discrimination, employment issues, whether it's FMLA, overtime, wage theft, civil rights discrimination. Also, we represent a number of unions. So, what happens if you get into a situation where you feel you're being discriminated against? You have a disability. There's a specific definition for that under both state and federal law. And you feel, or you've been discriminated against based on your race, your age, your sex, your religion, and you feel like you are the victim of discrimination. This could be whether you apply for a job and you feel like the reason you didn't get the job was because of one of those protected categories, or once you get the job, you feel like you're being treated wrongfully, you're being given a pay that's less than what your coworkers are making, or you are being given job responsibilities less, or you get a new boss and you are starting to face harassment. You hear different sorts of insults, everything from the N-word to whatever else you're hearing. We have people who tell us they may be in their 60s, and the new boss comes over and says, "Hey, when are you going to retire? You looking to get out of here anytime soon?" literally got cases in the office where that's happened. And those sorts of statements could very well be illegal. So what do you do? So the first thing that you want to do when something like this happens is document, document, document. All of us now have, many of us, most of us, not all of us have a little smartphone, or if you don't, you can go old school, and I still have a little paper, pen and pad. Write down what happens as it's happening to you. The worst thing that you can do is to face this sort of discrimination and try to blot it out. It is a coping mechanism for many of us who face very tumultuous circumstances, very trying times, where you cope by just trying to forget about it. Well, that's the wrong solution if you are, in fact, trying to do something about it later. So what you want to do is document it. Your boss makes that comment, when are you going to, when are you going to retire? We're going to have a great retirement, but I just can't wait. I just, go home that night or even during lunch that day and write it down. This is what she said. This is who else was around. Doesn't have to be anything elaborate, but you want to create a journal of those things happening. And then the next thing you want to do is complain. Complain, complain, complain. Always best to have written complaints so that you can prove that you made them. But one of the, Jocelyn and Lana went over it very thoroughly, you have the right to not be harassed because of your age, race, sex, religion, disability, sexual orientation, in Michigan, your height, your weight, your marital status. You have a right to not be harassed because of those things. But if you complain about it and then you face harassment, discrimination, you're fired because of it, that's called retaliation, which is a whole nother right. So oftentimes in some of the cases we deal with, the employee's rights to, it may be harder to prove that they face discrimination. It may be harder to prove that that comment, hey, when are you going to retire, was in fact age discrimination, because she may have asked that of someone else who was 35, But if you complain and the reason they did something to you is a result of that complaint, retaliation often becomes the easier case to prove. So the two things are document and complain. And how do you complain? Every place you work should have a handbook, should have an employee manual. You want to look in the manual, and that manual is going to tell you it should tell you who to complain to. And oftentimes we see cases where the manual isn't as thorough as it should be. That's fine. You want to go, maybe you ask your boss, I want to complain about something. Who do I go to? It's usually going to be the Human Resources office. Obviously, if it's your boss that's doing the treatment to you, it's not that person, right? But it's, sometimes we've seen the manual says that the person to complain to is the one who's doing the treatment. So what do? It's not your obligation to figure that out. You want to ask. I want to complain about something. Usually, Human Resources is a good place to go, but you want to document the complaint. Great thing to do now is if you got email, send an email. I feel like this is going on. Now, I heard someone say, oh boy, and let me deal with that. Because that is the big step, right? That's that no turning back. That's the moment of no return when you've decided to go public with what's happening to you. Well, the law protects you, and Jocelyn and Lana went through that. The law protects you for your right to complain. If you reasonably believe that what is happening to you is illegal because of some civil right, that's your right to complain about it. You don't have to be a lawyer to know, well, am I really disabled? Do I have a major life function which is the federal definition of disability? Do I have a major life function which prohibits me from one or more significant activities? That's a legal definition of disability. You don't have to know all of that. All you have to know is, I feel like because I have to appear to work in a wheelchair, or because I have to walk more slowly, or because my breathing is heavy and I have asthma and I need to take breaks periodically, because of that, I'm being treated differently. Now, do I fit the definition of legal disability? Maybe, maybe not. But your job as an employee isn't to figure that out. Your job is to, if you feel like you've been treated wrongfully, to complain about it. And then when you complain, put the issue in the complaint. If you have that email, type up, I feel like this is being done to me because of my disability, because of my race. Oftentimes when we look at a case and assess a specific case as to whether or not you have a lawsuit, we look for, did you complain? And if you did complain, did you put in the complaint something that's protected? Remember, to protected category is age, race, sex, disability, religion, and all the other things that I mentioned. We look to see, did they know you were complaining, not just about being treated wrong, not just because my boss is a jerk. If you say my boss is a jerk and he yells at me all the time, and I happen to be black, but the boss yells at your white coworker or yells at your younger coworker just like he yells at you because you're older, that may not be a protected claim. That may just be you got a bad boss. And it's not illegal to have a bad boss, unfortunately, as many of us know. But it is illegal if your boss is treating you that way because of one of those reasons. So the big issue in any of these claims is why. You want to ask not whether I'm being treated wrong, but why am I being treated that way? And if you put in your email to your boss, I feel like what's happening to me is because of my race, age, religion, sex, disability, whatever it may be, that email gets sent. I would do a read receipt, request delivery receipt, so that you can prove that you sent it. And then if it's sent from your work email, print it out so that if you do get fired, unfortunately, you have a copy of the fact that you sent it. Can't tell you how many times we have cases where people say, well, I emailed a complaint in. You did it from your work email. Well, now you no longer have access to your work email because you've been fired. And you didn't forward it to your personal email. You didn't print it out. So now we have to hope that they didn't delete it. And guess how many times we catch them on deleting stuff, right? So print it out, keep a copy of it, put it in a little folder, and then once you make that complaint, you'll be asked, hopefully if you have a decent organization that you work for, well, let's bring you in for a meeting. Let's talk about what's happened. And throughout that meeting, you want to make sure to remind them that, again, I believe this is being done because of my age, my race, sex, religion, disability, whatever the case may be. It's important for you to put that in there if you believe that that's the reason for your unfair treatment. Now, fast forward. Unfortunately, well, what happens is you make your complaint. The following week, they send you on a real tough work assignment. And you're like, oh, come on. I got to drive where? Or you mean I got to stay till 8 o'clock at night where usually I'm leaving at 5:30? This just so happened to be the week after I made my complaint? Unfortunately, it happens, but the law protects against that treatment. The law protects against that treatment. We can't guarantee that you won't get fired or harassed or unfairly treated for making a complaint, but we can guarantee that the law protects against it. And if we can prove that that's happening to you, then you have rights. Now, rights are no good when you're sitting in the unemployment line because you've been fired for 2 months and you're waiting on something to be done about your lawsuit. The alternative is you just don't fight. The alternative is you just decide, well, I know they're treating me this way. I know my white coworkers are getting better deals, or a case I had, I know my white coworkers are being given more opportunities in their apprenticeship program, or my white coworkers are, even as much as being driven to the work site or being given extra money or being given extra compensation opportunities, that all may be the case. You either can take it week after week, month after month, year after year, or you can decide to do something about it. And then that's got to be a decision between you, your family, pray about it, obviously, or talk through with, because there is going to be a significant situation potentially if you do decide to complain and they're going to come after you for it. But if you've been documenting, if you remember nothing else I said, document, complain. document, complain. If you've been documenting throughout the course of it happening, then when you do decide to make a decision to do something about it, you've got all your records. Not records that are on the company's computer, though, because trust and believe, if you're sending emails on the company's email system, they have access to those emails. Don't think that those emails are private simply because it's between you and only someone else. Don't email your lawyer from the company's email system. I can't tell you, it's happened a few times where we've had cases where they've emailed something and they thought it was private, and you get to the hearing and lo and behold, all these emails printed up. They'll go into it, they have a right to it. You send those off, you decide to complain. Now what's the next step? You have what's called, how many have heard of a statute of limitations? All right? Who can tell me, other than non-lawyers, who can tell me what a statute of limitation is? No lawyers can answer this question. Go ahead. He's dressed like a lawyer. That's why people think he's a lawyer. All right. All right. Good. So basically, for those who and I know we didn't, and that was my fault. I didn't have to give them the mic, but statute of limitations is basically a time limit within which you can file a claim or lawsuit for rights that you believe have been violated. Who knows what the statute of limitation is under the Michigan civil rights claims that typically for the statute of limitations for you to get the Civil Rights Department to investigate a claim? I see your hand. Go ahead. You said the lawsuit?
The Lawson Act, is it 120 days for the state of
180
Michigan?
days. So Civil Rights Department will investigate something that happened within the last 180 days. There is a federal Civil Rights Department called the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission. They will investigate something which happens within the last 300 days. But even if something has happened 181 days later, John's gonna hate me for this, file the claim anyway, because they'll give you your right. They are very good at listening to people when you call in and giving you a great explanation. They do investigations, they send out requests for information. So the key piece about filing a claim at either the federal agency, EEOC, or the state agency, MDCR, is that if you are going to sue under federal law, so let me break it out. You have federal laws which protect against civil rights, and you have state laws which protect against civil rights. Age, race, sex, religion, disability, all of those things have a federal law. In the federal law, it's called Title VII, the Civil Rights Act, 1964. We can thank Reverend Dr. King for that. And then you have the state law, which is typically Elliott Larson, but there's also People with Disabilities Civil Rights Act in the state of Michigan. So you have state laws, federal laws. They are very similar, cover similar things. There's some nuances, which, with our differences, but for purposes here, they're very similar. They both protect those rights. In order for you to file a lawsuit under the state law, you do not have to file an agency claim first. But under federal law, under Title VII, the law requires that before you go to court to sue your boss or sue your company, you have to file a claim with an agency before going to court. And so you can file a claim with either the federal agency, EEOC, or the state agency, MDCR, and then the two of them will You know, they've sent cases back and forth between. And then when you file that claim, when you call, it wouldn't be Jocelyn, Alana, whoever answers the phone, it's civil rights. You're going to be, that is effectually you filing the claim. They have to get the information from you, sign the document, and then the charge gets processed and sent. What's supposed to happen within that 180 days is all of that taking place. You contact, okay, cool. You contact, you file the claim, and then the charge is signed, and then they serve the charge on the boss. You know, Richard is bringing a claim for a civil rights violation. That has to happen within that statute of limitations time frame. If you want to just sue under state court, you get 3 years under the Elliott Larson law to sue for a state violation. So if you miss the timeline under federal, 300 days to sue, you can do it within 3 years. Remember, just quickly, review federal law, you file a claim within 300 days of something happening to you, and that's 300 days of whether you're fired, 300 days for that. If you want to allege harassment, say you were harassed January 1st, but you didn't get fired until November 1st, well, you can sue or you can file a claim for the firing from November 1st, 300 days forward, but you better watch out, because if you were harassed January 1st, unless you can argue continued violation, you want to capture that point. You really want to file the claim as early as you can. That's the lesson. So you file the claim, you make sure that the claim says what it needs to say, and then you proceed forward, and then finally they do an investigation, civil rights or EEOC, and then you get a right to sue letter. 90+% of the claims that are filed get a right to sue letter. What does that mean? It just means that you have a right to file a lawsuit. Under the federal law, it requires that you go through an agency process first to file a claim. Once you do that, you then can go to court. And how many days do you have in order to file a lawsuit once you get that golden right to sue letter under federal law? Who knows that? And again, non-lawyers. It's 90 days. So when that letter is dated, you look at the date on that letter, and you have 90 days to find a lawyer if you don't have one already, file a lawsuit. All right? What are the 2 things that I want you all to take away from this short presentation as I'm smelling chicken? 2 things. What are the 2 most important things that I want you to take away? Non-lawyers, especially not Jocelyn, because you've seen, come on, now, that's not fair. Document, complain. Document, complain. Document what is happening to you and complain about what is happening to you, and keep a copy of your complaints. Your complaint should be in writing. If you made a verbal complaint, you were walking to the bathroom, you saw your boss and said, I'm sick of this, I can't deal with this anymore, and you made a verbal complaint, go back home that night and type all out what you said. And even better, send an email confirming, hey, we had a conversation yesterday, and this is what I told you, and this is what you said, If you document what is going on, it's going to make your ultimate litigation much, much more successful. Again, I think, are we ready to? Who's giving me are we ready to eat? Because I certainly smell it. Oh, yes.
Alana, scared myself. This is Alana speaking again. I just want to tag on a little bit of what you mentioned, right? That 181 day. You can definitely still call our department, right? We will be upfront with you about what our state statute of limitation is, but don't be discouraged, because MDCR does have a partnership with EEOC, in that if you do contact us on that day 181 and you can't file with MDCR, we are still a resource in order to be able to file with EEOC, right? So that is to say, you don't have to go to both. You can come to us and we can work to initiate that, even if you are past that 180 days, right? So again, that 180 days is firm for our department, but even if you're past that, it's not all lost, right? We are still a resource to get you to EEOC, should that be the case.
Very good. And the beautiful thing about MDCR is they will tell you that when you do call. They will give you that information. Other things, yes, sir. You can get the mic.
does the state, excuse me, does the state statute, oh Lord, let me see. Does the state statute limit the time, how many times that you can file? So let's say that you have experienced this discrimination multiple times. And after each incident, would you have that time to file? So let's say you missed the time on the first opportunity to file, you missed that, but the time that it occurred again, because issues like these, they occur multiple times, but you find out that you're being discriminated against the second or third time. Could you still be able to file with the state about that incident? Because I'm thinking about the case of Lily Ledbetter, where the U.S. Supreme Court had said, well, you can't file. I say we're going to dismiss your case because you could only file at the first time. You could only file when you first known about it. So the first time that discrimination occurred, and this is about pay discrimination.
Right.
But if you remember back when President Obama was first elected, he signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, which said, okay, you can file anytime. You can file every single time where you found that discrimination occurred. Is that case? And I do apologize if I got that legal interpretation mixed up. But the idea is there a point where you can file at the times where you know that you're being discriminated against?
No, it's a good question. So yeah, the Lilly Ledbetter Act was, yes, put into place because the premise was that with that opinion, she was being paid unfairly, and they said, yeah, even though the pay, you're being paid unfairly even today, it started, you first noticed it way back when, and the statute of limitations runs from when you knew or should have known. And they said, yeah, you should have known that you were being paid unfairly at this point, and so because that was after the statute of limitations, and then of course the act came back and said, whenever you get a paycheck, that's a new element of discrimination. Each paycheck, each pay that you get, every time the payroll hits. So what he's asking about is what's called continuing violation. And so there's a theory in the law, more so now in the federal law, because we had some bad, I can't be political, but anyway, I will be, but not while we're waiting on chicken. But basically, there's some bad rulings in state law regarding continued violation. But the premise is that because it happened to me one day and it continued over the course of many months or years, can I capture back to when it happened the first time? I want to tell you to push for it. It may not happen, but the premise is get into the agency, get into court as soon as you can. And when you get and sit down with that investigator at the agency, you tell them this is the first time it happened. One thing that's really, really important when you fill out these charge forms, so when you go to Civil Rights Department, you go to EEOC, they're going to give you what's called a charge form, which kind of lays out for the employer what your charge is. So if you started being discriminated against back in 2019 and you don't file until 2025, well, that's obviously been going on 6 years, hard to make a claim for continued violation. But what you want to make sure of is on that charge form is the earliest date that they'll let you put it down. Because you don't want to say, when you go in 2025, it's going to say earliest date that it happened. You don't want to say, August 2025 when you know that you've been going through it to 2024, 2023, because what's going to end up happening is that charge form is going to be brought forward in court. And then the employers they've always do it, they always argue, well, look, you said that the first time it happened was October 2025, because that's what your charge form says. And you say, yeah, but I didn't think about that when I sat down to sign a charge. So you just want to make sure that the earliest date you can go back, you put on that charge form. So the answer to the question is, it depends, like everything in the law, but you want to make sure to push for it. My answer to any legal question I get asked, if you push for as much as you're going to get, and then let the law figure out whether you can get it. All right? So that's okay. I think we are ready to eat. And so again, thank you, Richard Mack, Miller Cohen. If you have any questions, what? Oh, okay. All right. So thank you, Miller Cohen. If you have any questions, you can reach out 964-4454. And thank you again. Let's dig in. Oh, all right. So yeah, let's bless the food. I got the mic, so hey, let's praise the Lord. So all minds and hearts clear. Heavenly Father, we thank you this day for this food and for this gathering, Lord. We ask that your anointing be here to inform and educate each and every one here. We ask that you bless the food and the hands that prepared it. Bless it for the nourishment of our bodies, Lord. We ask all these things in the mighty, matchless name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
got a great program for you for the rest of today. But before we do that, I'd just like to give you a little information about the NAACP Detroit branch. We essentially operate on a system where we have, of course, president, executive director, vice president, et cetera. But we also have an executive committee. You may have seen many of them a little earlier when we were over here taking photographs. In addition to the executive committee, which really makes the decisions for the local branch, we have committees that work. And two of the committees that have brought you this Crockett Community Law School today are the Criminal Justice Committee and the Legal Redress Committee. Each of those committees has, of course, a chair. And I do want you to acknowledge our chair for those committees. First, we have Erin Keith, seated way over there to your left, my left, your right. She chairs the Criminal Justice Committee. And then we have Richard Mack, who you've met already. He chairs the Legal Redress Committee. Importantly, the Detroit branch does not stand alone. We have a state conference which really helps us to stay in line, I suppose we should say, and to get our work done. Very fortunate today that we have our state conference president with us this morning and now this afternoon. And I want to ask if Yvonne White would come forward and just give us a few words of wisdom. Ms. White? And I want you to particularly notice these wonderful nails.
He's trying to tease me.
They're beautiful.
Uh-huh. He's trying to tease me. I'm a Delta and proud of it. I am sporting my symbol, so any Deltas in the house. But I accept that. And I'm at home. This is not, I'm not visiting. This is my home branch and very proud of it. The Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony as your leader, our leader and president. And the great work that our branch does. I'm a proud life member of the Detroit branch, been so for more years than I care to say. But I've also had the distinct honor and pleasure of serving as the state president for some 24 years now. We were just up in Port Huron. I even see a Port Huron member here this morning. And so, but we were up in Port Huron last weekend with our state convention and a lot of training and boot camp. We don't do much like others, but I'm so pleased to be here today in this great George Crockett Law School that the Detroit branch has been doing for a number of years. And this is a wealth of information, so impressive. This really should be done on a national model because this is what the community needs. And so if you're here and you're visiting and you're not a member of the NAACP, the only thing I can say is get involved. Get involved because the members here, your executive committee members, your leadership, your president, our president, they do this work voluntarily. And so we don't get paid for any of this. We work day in, day out, weekends, night, day, year round. And so along with your president, Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony, we both have the pleasure of serving on the National Board of Directors as well. And so we're very serious about this work. I brag about Detroit all the time. Detroit has led the way, not only here in Michigan, but throughout this country. And so we have nothing but great expectations for the work that you do. Continue that work. Know that it's a thankless job. But we're here to always lift up whenever we can, wherever we go, the great work that you're doing. So God bless you, and thank you for always being on the front line of freedom and justice. God bless.
So now I'm going to ask Richard Mack to come back up here, take over the afternoon program. He will introduce to you our panelists for this wonderful program this afternoon, as well as our moderator. Richard?
All right. So I'm going to start off introducing the moderator. Good friend of mine. I see he's ready. Didn't even get a chance to eat. That's how self-serving, that's how selfless he is. He just comes right in, moving from one event to the next. His name is Kevin Tolbert. Good buddy of mine for many, many years. He is currently the chair of the Michigan Democratic Party 12th District Committee, a very influential position, mover and shaker within the party. He is the first vice president for the Detroit branch NAACP, and he's currently chief of staff for Wayne County Sheriff. And just anything regarding politics in this town, he's got his hand somewhere in it. So Kevin Tolbert, let's give him a warm round of applause. And he is going to moderate our panel, which is going to be addressing the big, beautiful / ugly bill. The ugly bill, general bill. We all know what it is. We all have heard about it. And in that, last time you went to the grocery store, you probably saw the impact of it. But what we will hear about is the specifics of what is entailed in it and what we need to do about it. And we have three dynamic people who are going to be doing that. First is we actually have another chair with the Detroit branch here. He was giving us some little pearls of wisdom earlier in the morning. Chris Crawford, he's the chair of the Economic Development for NAACP Detroit branch, and he's a financial advisor with CPR Investments. He's got a bachelor's degree in finance with 13 years of experience. He specializes in helping individuals and families build wealth through smart investments and insurance strategies. So Chris Crawford, thank you. Y'all can go ahead and start sitting down. Kevin's the only one got to stand up. And then we have Derek Ware. Derek Ware is an accomplished leader with 25 years of public and private sector experience. He is currently the president and CEO of Detroit Community Health Connection. It's a federally qualified health center, which the primary care organization providing accessible, affordable, quality service. And he's got a bachelor's in business administration and business leadership from Clear University, master's in health, honorary doctorate of science at Clear University, received numerous awards. So let's give it up for Derek Ware, Dr. Derek Ware. And last but certainly not least is Donald Stuckey. Mr. Stuckey is a Metro Detroit area community engagement specialist. He works with organizations to connect between public policy and everyday life. He is previously a Challenge Detroit Fellow with DTE Energy relating to sustainability. He's got a bachelor's degree of Eastern and a master's degree from dispute resolution from Wayne State University and another master's degree from public administration and policy from U of M Dearborn. So let's give it up for Mr. Stuckey. And with that, I'll turn it over to my boy, Mr. Tolbert.
Thank you so much. This mic is on midget height. Okay, there we go, a little bit better. Thank you, Mr. Richard Mack, who I must take a personal note to say has been a great friend over the years. I was told a long time ago that it's your relationships that'll get you much further in life than anything else. So I wanted to be like Richard, so I just figured let me just make him my friend and absorb his knowledge and intellect and everything that he has. Only thing he didn't do right was go to Cass Tech. Other than that, he did everything that I wanted to do in life, and I'm still trying to catch up with him. So, but Richard's a great man and a great labor attorney and a great activist in our community. So you all are very fortunate to have him in front of you and share some of the great work that he's been doing and leading in our panel. And we're fortunate to have him as a chair on the board of the leadership of our Detroit branch of the NAACP. So yeah, we're really excited here to come before you all to talk and to really share information. You know, this project, the George Crockett Community School of Law, is really awesome that we've been doing this. It's continually growing, and it's great to have the people here online as well as in person and participating with us. And I didn't do it, brother. His face looked like somebody turned off his feed. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. But, you know, we're really here to talk about this big, ugly bill, right? This bill that was pitched as a promise that was supposed to help working families, reduce taxes, and strengthen our economy. But we knew that the more that you read between the lines, it wasn't what it was going to do. It was really shifting the burdens from the many, shifting the burdens from the rich and putting them on the backs of many of working class people. So as we watch protections get rolled back, we're seeing the cost of education get pushed higher and higher. We're seeing healthcare tighten across communities. And we know right now this government shutdown that we're in is really about the battle for healthcare. And if they're allowed to do what they're proposing to do, how it would drastically alter healthcare in this country. You know, and it's shameful, and that's why venues like this is so important, because it's education. And many times we don't get a chance to educate and give people this knowledge. So they get a little snippet on the news and they think, oh, that's what we're supposed to be doing. But yet we know now that the news and the media is manipulative, and this man has sued every network we have. And so you don't know if what you're getting you can trust. And if he's not sued them, his friends has purchased the networks. And that's just not the networks, that's social media. He has either sued every social media company or he has put his friends in place to own them. So that's why having three fantastic leaders from our community to be in front of us, to join us, to talk about what's going on with this bill is really important. So we're prepared, we're educated, and we know what to do next. So, you know, this conversation, you know, we're just gonna warm and ease into this and just have a quick conversation. And some of these guys wanted to kid me and say, hey, Kevin, don't be digging me down through policy. But trust me, the topics that they know, they really know. And so I'm excited to share that with you all. And so with that, we're just going to jump out the gate, and I'm going to pose a couple questions to you all. Well, you know what? Let me give you all a chance to say a quick opening first, if you want to take 2 minutes and give a quick opening, and then we'll jump into questions. So I'm going to start at the far end, and I will start with you, Donald. There you go.
All right. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the Detroit NAACP for the invitation to come and speak. My name is Donald Stuckey, as you know. I'm with the Michigan League for Public Policy. The League is a 113-year-old organization, first set up as the conference of, it was set up by two social workers to try and address poverty in our state, and we continue that work today. Using policy and data to advocate for policy solutions that are going to uplift our communities out of poverty. And so the League is very proud to have been doing this work for more than a century, and we are very proud to continue to work with one of our long-term partners, and that is the NAACP. So I'm working with multiple branches in the area of the state that I serve. Very excited to talk about this HR 1, because it is certainly not beautiful, and very glad to talk about this legislation today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Derek Ware. I'm President and CEO of Detroit Community Health Connection. We are a federally qualified healthcare center. Been in business for over 35 years. The purpose of our business is to see patients without insurance and underinsured, but because of the ACA, we were able to sign folks up for insurance and be reimbursed for that. We have 7 sites: medical, dental, and behavioral health, West Side, Midtown, and the East Side. And I'm going to talk about how this HR 1, I don't even use the full title, HR 1, affects the business that we do because 85% of the patients that we see are on Medicaid.
All right. Can everybody hear me? Okay. My name is Chris Crawford. I am the chair of the Economic Development Committee for the Detroit branch of the NAACP. I'm a financial advisor / wealth planner by trade with CPR Investments. My passion is taking the information that I have accumulated over my 13 years in the business and actually helping create black wealth and create wealth in our community. We're going to talk about how how a lot of what you're seeing in the Big Beautiful Bill / ugly bill affects everybody else, affects us. We hear about, we're going to talk about the pros, because there's allegedly pros, right? I'm going to address why the pros are really not pros. And then we're going to really get into what we can do to address these things. So.
Awesome. So since you have the mic, we might as well keep it right there with you. I'm going to pose our first question to you. So how does the raising of the debt ceiling project a reduction of taxes for the average taxpayer in the United States?
So raising the debt ceiling isn't necessarily going to, that's not what's going to cause people's taxes to go up, right? Like eventually down the road, we're going to have to pay for that. They're going to use that as an excuse to continue to dodge it, go into Social Security like they've been doing. They're used as an opportunity to cut Medicare and Medicaid and things of that nature. But really, one of the things that people are not realizing when it comes to the tax cuts in this bill, yes, for people 30,000 to 150,000, you may see a little bit of a benefit. However, when they did the math, if you make $50,000 or less, you're going to pay $700 more a year. And if you make $17,000 or less, you're going to pay $1,000 more a year in taxes. Now, the average income in the city of Detroit is $39,500. That is going to hurt our community extremely. Those tax cuts that they're talking about don't help. The other thing about the tax cuts is these are tax cuts that were put into place in 2017. They're just making them permanent. So you're not getting more money off your taxes. And in fact, it's going just to continue to hurt our population. And with these tax cuts, with the way they figured it out, we're looking at adding $3.8 trillion to the deficit because that's revenue that they're no longer getting, which is going to lead to cutting in other programs. So I hope that's my way of answering that one.
No. And the reality is hearing that we keep being told over and over, we're cutting taxes, we're cutting taxes, we're cutting your taxes. So obviously this is not a tax cut in any way, shape, or form. I want to let you comment on that, Donald.
Yeah, I wanted to provide you, because the league, we do analysis on our state budget, on these federal policies. And so we put together some social math to try and help you understand a bit about how this tax bill, and just as you mentioned, the bottom 20%, the tax breaks that you would benefit, you would be able to fill up you would be able to pay for about a half a tank of gas in the tax benefit that you would get. The middle, you could buy a new pair of tires for 2 cars. The richest 1%, they would be able to drive a brand new car straight off the lot with this tax bill. This is according to our analysis, and so you can see that that there's really not a benefit, because a lot of us are going to be actually paying more and seeing the cost, the reductions in critical services like SNAP, like Medicaid, which we're going to talk a lot about today. So just something to keep in mind. There is really not an actual benefit, tax benefit, for most Americans in here.
So I love that analogy. We can't forget that. The lower parts of our economy, the people who are the worst off, can get a tank of gas. The middle class might get a couple set of tires, and the rich get a whole brand new car.
Yes.
I do have one thing to add. And I do have one more thing to add. So 2/3 of the tax cuts are going to households with incomes of $217,000 and above, with actually a quarter of those people making over $1.1 million a year. So truly, the upper echelon of tax brackets are the ones that are getting the help. Like I said, anybody over $50,000 a year, your taxes went up. Now, what they're trying to do is they're trying to tell you, well, that's okay because we doubled the child tax credit. Not necessarily true. They're increasing it by $500 a year for the next few years up to 2028, but they also put in some stipulations where 4.5 million kids that have one parent that doesn't have a Social Security number are no longer qualified for that benefit. So they literally cut 4.5 million kids off of it while they're raising it, right? These are just some of the things with the taxes that we're seeing that people think they're getting benefit from when they're really not.
And if we really wanted to help working class people and middle class America, right, we could have did things like cutting taxes on things like student, or cutting back and providing debt relief on student loans, or we could have cut taxes which they removed like mortgage deductions, and then various other cuts that would help the middle class. This bill didn't do any of that, right?
Right.
No, it actually hurt.
We could have renewed the federal child tax credit. If you remember, when President Biden passed that law, when he signed that into law, we cut childhood poverty in half in the United States. And because we allowed it to expire, that means that we have purposely put people back in poverty by not doing so. And the funny thing is that there was actually some bipartisan discussion, especially with Congressman John James, in 2024, we're talking about actually, putting the having the child tax credit. So it is very disappointing when we're choosing to put people into poverty when we know that there are policies that can get people out of poverty.
Yeah, people often talk about like class warfare. If you remember in years past, especially under the 8 years of Obama, anytime we talked about raising taxes on the rich, people go, oh, that's class warfare. But do you all think this is class warfare right now? I mean, in effect.
Kevin, before you
sure.
go, I would like to say that this bill was passed with one vote because it was a tie. So the vice president had to vote. So that's how we got this H.R. 1 bill, one vote by the vice president. I also want to say, when you're talking about tax cuts and this bill, they feel like they're going to give you something. Well, we're going to take something away, but we're going to give you something. And their something was permanently extends the 2017 tax rates, 10%, 12%, 22%, 24%, 32%, 35%, and 37%. So that's our tax rate now. They also gave us deductions for working folks that receive tips, up to $25,000 a year. $25,000 a year. And overtime, $12,500. That's a part of this bill.
Which are all temporary.
And 65 plus get an additional $6,000 deduction through 2028. Increase state and local tax deduction cap at $40,000 from $10,000 through 2029. So this bill takes us beyond 2 years. So they give you something, but they're going to take something.
So along those lines, and we were talking about that, like this class warfare, and we know that, especially here in Detroit, I mean, we've been a labor town, and so this was sort of pitched, and we know that Detroit Michigan actually was a red state in the last election, and it went for Donald Trump. And so this was pitched as something that working class people enjoy, but at the end of the day, it's really not helping. What do you all think about in a city like Detroit? This bill went through, we're talking about taxes happening, we got a government lockout. Does this in any way look like this is beneficial for residents of Detroit? Anybody want to take that first?
Not when it comes to Medicaid.
Okay, go ahead.
Not when it comes to Medicaid.
Can you explain really quick who gets Medicaid first? Because they tend to, we hear different stories on that.
It's not black folks. I'll just say that. And it's factual, it's documented. Because anything that has to do with what they consider a handout, we're generally the ones that the face of it. And the documents or the facts are totally different. Detroit and Wayne County enrolled about 11,400 per 100,000 folks, which means that Michigan had 2 million, a little over 2 million enrolled in Medicaid, with 742,000 adults in the expansion of Healthy Michigan, which extends coverage to about 700,000 Michiganians. So when it comes to Detroit and Medicaid, this bill will not, particularly with the back to work or work requirements, that it's gonna put a cap on families. And I can go on and on and on, but I'll let Chris say what he's gonna say.
We pass the mic here to Chris.
No, I'm sorry.
All right, so Medicaid in Detroit. Well, let's just do Medicaid in Michigan. What a lot of people don't realize is when they think of Medicaid, they think of it basically for poor kids, right? That's what they say in the media. It's for poor kids 19 and under, people whose families that can't afford health care. When actually the biggest population of people that benefit from Medicaid are people in long-term care facilities of all races and all ages. So I did some math. In the state of Michigan, 70% of all long-term care, if your grandma's in a nursing home or getting assisted living or anything like that, that is paid for by Medicaid. Not Medicare, Medicaid, right? So we're looking at millions of people being being kicked out of facilities possibly, that are in no condition to go back to work, that are sick. It also looks at, when they're looking at making some changes to the state expansion part, they may take away your ability to have home care or community-based care for your seniors. Now you're gonna institutionalize your parents and grandparents. That's not conspiracy theory, that's fact. And we all know the quality of care that you get from somebody, whether it's a home care worker or somebody that's in your family versus somebody that's a complete stranger in an institution type setting, is vastly different. Unfortunately, the average cost just for a 2-room assisted living facility or nursing home is $10,500 a year. If you want your own room, it's $12,000, and that's the bare minimum. And I will tell you, the difference between a $12,000 room and a $20,000 room is whether you get bed sores or not. It's, as a financial advisor, I see it with clients all the time. The level of care that you get, unfortunately, comes down to what you have access to. By the major cuts are looking at Medicaid is going to severely impact our loved ones in our most vulnerable communities. And people aren't talking about that part. They're focusing on 18 to 64-year-olds that may be able to work. Most of them are already on disability, so they're not able to work. But they're painting it as people that are lazy and just don't want to work. When in reality, it's grandma and grandpa and other people that have no ability to take care of themselves. And that's going to be impacted now even with the shutdown because we're running out of funding.
Also, I'm sorry, Kevin.
Well, let me just pivot. I'm going to pivot right to that for you because I want to ask you a question specifically along those lines. You know, if you think about, if you go back to, I'm a student of history. In 1976, Ronald Reagan ran for president, and it was, he was not successful, but he really started the complete outright assault on what they called was welfare. And what they did, to your point earlier, Derek, was they put the face and said it was one black woman from Chicago who was getting so much money in welfare. And they put her face out, and everyone got really angry over that. And so it was a picture to the nation that we got to get rid of welfare. And it took about a few years, maybe about 20 completely, where they were saying we got to eliminate financial payments to people, even though the majority of the people that were receiving those benefits looked nothing like the woman who they used. And so it got people to fight against itself. And so here now we get to the point to 2025, and here comes a bill that says we will prohibit federal Medicaid payments for 10 years to certain health care providers that serve low-income or underserved communities if the provider offers any family planning, any abortion services, any reproductive health, or any related health care. And so can you talk a little bit about, you know, that portion of it and how that's going to affect places like Detroit and Pontiac and Novi?
Absolutely. And I do want to piggyback on what Chris said. When you think of Medicaid, Medicaid is kind of based on income. So just let that digest for a minute. Medicaid is based on income. The working poor qualifies for Medicaid. 70% of the folks that are Medicaid, they're working full-time jobs, and 26% are part-timers. So they're already working. What this bill does, it did not look into other things. But to get back to your question, Kevin, we already know what the Supreme Court has done with abortions. So they're making it a crime for providers, even if you have to make a medical decision. That's one thing. But the underlying tone is for immigrants, transgenders. That's the underlying tone. So, and because of the business that I'm in, and we have behavioral health is real. Suicide in young folks is real. A lot of the young people that we see in our offices has to do with their sexuality. Suicide is real. So that's how it's going to affect us.
Anyone else want to comment on that? Donald?
Yeah, and thank you for making those points. It's very important. You know, we have, in Michigan, we have a total of about 2.6 million Michiganders that are on Medicaid. And over almost 50% of children, about 45% of children who are born in Michigan, their parents were Medicaid recipients. And it's not just Wayne County that has a high proportion of people on Medicaid, but it's other areas throughout our state. I have been in rural communities across Michigan this year. I had an opportunity to speak with the director of the Children's Hospital in Grand Rapids. He told me that about 40% of their patients in their children's hospital are Medicaid recipients. And so you see how when you decide to make cuts and put in work requirements and things like that, that it is going to have a very negative effect. And especially in rural communities, if you live in a rural community like northern Michigan, up in the UP, they have a high amount of people who are also on Medicaid. And so that's how they primarily fund their hospital operations and healthcare services. And so when you don't have access, when you cut Medicaid or you put policies in place that makes it difficult to access or keep your Medicaid benefits, those services start to go away. So where it may have taken only a half an hour to get to the closest medical provider, it now takes an hour or 2 hours to get there. So think about if you are trying to give birth. And if you are in a medical emergency, time is of the essence. And so those folks are really going to benefit, it's going to be much more difficult to get access to those services. The amount of people who go into the emergency room to receive emergency care, that cost is going to go up. That cost hits the hospital. And so that was one of the reasons why the Affordable Care Act was passed, to try and combat that, was to get people to, see a medical person and not have to rely on the emergency room for their care. And so we're hearing these stories across the city, across the state, where people are in this situation. I want to throw a couple of other facts at you, because you talked a little bit about the work requirement. The work requirements generally are not very effective. And they do not actually impact employment rates, because that's one of the arguments of why we want to make it more difficult for people to get on SNAP and to get on, and when I say SNAP, I mean nutrition assistance, that's your food stamp program. So it doesn't really impact employment rates. It actually costs taxpayers more money because of the higher administrative costs that are associated with it. It harms families, and so it leads to more loss. Specifically in HR 1, it actually requires semi-annual renewals of benefits. That means every 6 months instead of opposed to where it was just once every year. And so what that does is that it creates more impediments. So it is a situation where you would only have to renew once a year, now you have to renew twice a year in order to do so. So creating these barriers, because, I mean, think about it. You have to renew every 6 months. It makes it more difficult. You might miss, you may not be reminded of it, that you renewed, that you need to go back and renew. It makes it more difficult for you to, track down the paperwork and things like that you would have to prove that you're working and things of that nature. So this is how cutting Medicaid, cutting SNAP is how HR 1 pays for the tax cuts. So I want to make very clear on that. Cutting these critical social safety net programs is how the federal government or how the administration has chosen to pay for tax cuts for rich individuals. I want to make that there's no doubt in that. And we're talking about a total of about 100, and I want to make sure I get this number correct. I believe it's about $170 billion is what they wanted to cut. And these cuts, these work requirements and things of that nature are how they use that to achieve that goal.
Just to piggyback, 42% of Michigan hospitals operate under Medicaid dollars. If they cut these dollars from Medicaid, hospitals are required still to see you, and that's why they're closing, because now it's uncompensated care. That's the business that I'm in, because we get federal grants, even though we gotta abide by this bill, but there are other laws still that says we can't turn people away based on their ability to pay. So that's uncompensated care that we still have to do, and we still have to figure a way to pay our doctors, to pay our nurses, to pay our staff. But there is still uncompensated care because there are other laws that say, particularly for the hospitals in the emergency room, anybody can walk in the emergency room. Anybody, regardless of nationality. Immigrants can walk in the emergency room, and you still got to see them, regardless of what HR 1 says, because they're getting other funding. So they still have to do that.
You guys brought up a lot of interesting points, and the one that particularly about hospitals and how we're losing hospitals, and even the ones that do open, that stay open, and that set up, they're actually losing so much money, then they try to recoup it through other ways. And even yesterday, I was talking to a lady that's a HR supervisor at one of our local hospitals, and she spoke to her concern because she said, we're firing people left and right, nurses and assistants and surgical techs and people, because they're making so many errors, because the truth of the matter is we're hiring people rapidly who aren't paid in a fair manner. So we're not always getting the best people. And so, and her concern, she was just saying to me, like, going in the hospital is a scary time right now because of this. So we are making our healthcare system worse with this bill. It was brought up earlier, and I really think it is something on all of our minds right now about SNAP and how SNAP and the lack of payments to SNAP is not happening. And this bill touches SNAP a little bit as well. So now this legislation is currently in place. We know there's a government shutdown, and we know he's refusing to fund, the president's refusing by law, which he's obligated by law, because the money was set aside already to fund SNAP, and he's refusing to do it. If you remember, and let me be clear and say this, the NAACP is a nonpartisan organization, but we will discuss facts. We will talk about what's happening. And so the president is refusing to do his constitutional obligation. And you remember during the election last year, he was specifically asked the question, will you follow the Constitution? And then right now he's going, nope, I'm not doing it. Nobody can make me do it. And so this bill says, like we were speaking about earlier, being work requirements were expanded for SNAP recipients in addition to general SNAP work registration and employment and training requirements. And then they went on further to say that this requirements are not imposed on persons over 65, but it's from age 17. So they lowered it. It didn't used to be 17. And this is another push that we're watching as they continue now to talk about laws that lower the working age, that go after our younger people. And, you know, what was that, the 1910s when we, started to eliminate young people having to work? And now we're going back to that in time. Can you all speak to that a little bit? Chris, I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the SNAP benefits. What I want to focus on, everybody focuses on the big number, right? Millions of people. What we really need to be focused on is the fact that 40% of Detroiters are receiving SNAP benefits. This is definitely going to affect our communities throughout the country, right? And part of it goes to, again, we're nonpartisan, I'm nonpartisan. But if you look at the cities that are going to be affected the most by this type of legislation, it's people that tended to vote against the current administration, which is retaliatory. People don't think about that. It very much is going to impact our community. The state of Michigan alone, 13% of the state of Michigan receives SNAP benefits, 13% of the state, to the tune of about $258 million a month. That's not just Detroit. We're talking about like 1.5 million people that are going to be affected by this. And it's not just about food. Food is the beginning of, you can't send kids to school hungry and expect them to learn, right? You can't expect people to focus on their jobs if they're trying to figure out how much food they're going to divvy up between them and their kids. It's also a healthcare issue. I'm not a healthcare expert, but it's also a healthcare issue when you have people that are malnourished. SNAP benefits is more than just people getting money, like they like to say, for steak and lobster, and like the stereotypical stuff that you see on certain news outlets, right? It's people feeding their families so they can live. And I want to make sure that while we're talking about the numbers, that we really take the time to like focus on the human aspect of that. 40% of our city, that means we all know somebody that's affected by this. So I just wanted to say that.
Part of social determinants of health in my business is just because we write a prescription, we need to make sure that you're able to take that prescription. And some of our prescriptions you have to take with food, even at a baby's level. You have to take with food, you have to take with milk, you have to take with whatever. But we need to make sure that we're writing prescriptions that folks can take. And a part of it is making sure they have food. So we have to be the resource to actually refer folks to other places to get food. Unfortunately, that this is happening, and the work requirements. There are situations where, and it's more paperwork, that you can get approval to not to work. If you have, like he said, disabilities, and there's a process for your provider to write something. And also when we talk about work requirements, it could be volunteering somewhere as well. So that's included in that as well.
I want to make sure, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of things here.
Really briefly, and then we're going to be closing our panel.
1.4 million Michiganders rely on SNAP benefits. That's over 527,000 children, represents about 23%, receive SNAP benefits. 1 in 10 Michigan workers use SNAP to feed their families, and almost 40,000 veterans receive SNAP benefits. I wish I had a little bit more time to talk about some of these very specific things, but these, as been mentioned, these SNAP benefits are critical. We have a hunger problem in the United States. There's a lot of people that are facing insecurity in their ability to feed themselves and their family, and just as the doctor mentioned here, food is often associated, a healthy diet is often associated with good health. And, you know, when our communities don't have access to those things, it makes it extremely difficult for our family. And, you know, it's just that when you put all of these cuts in place, it makes it more difficult for us to be able to do the things that we do. This is why the league fought very hard to make sure that the universal lunch program, breakfast and lunch program, stayed in our state budget. And we're very proud of that fact that that's still in there. And we fought alongside many of our partners, including the NAACP, to keep that in our state budget. But again, it's under threat because of these cuts that are coming. And certainly, I would invite you to go to our website at mlpp.org, where there are a lot of fact sheets that we have that can tell you more about this bill, and tell you why some of these things that we're seeing are not very good for our state and our communities across Michigan.
We got a little bit more time, I was told, so I'm going to keep pushing with a couple more questions to you all. One interesting part that I found, about reading in this thing is they always hide things in legislation. And one of the little things that was hidden in there is that Section 43201, it says that every city, every mayor, and every community will basically have no say in how AI is used. And they turn it into a criminal penalty, if you will. And so can you guys talk a little bit about why things are hidden in bills like that, and why in the world would they want to force us to have to use AI and not allow AI to have any limitations?
Can I just say that it's funny you brought that up, because when I go to D.C., I never meet, well, I won't say never, I generally don't meet with the congressperson or the rep. I generally meet with staff, because it's the staff's responsibility to read the entire bill. So when I bring issues up, you know what I'm talking about, and then you can pass that along to the representative. But you say why it's in there? Why do they have a 900-page document for a bill? So folks won't read it. So that I can put in, even though you're dealing with health care, I need a new train system. And in order for me to pass your bill, I need you to put my train system that I need in my state in your bill, and I don't care where you put it. It can be on page 299, but I need that in there in order for you to pass your bill. But once again, this bill was 50-50, and only one person voted to make this bill what it is today.
Yeah, and then when you think about the fact that in an urban community, so I'm a big technology person, I love it, but technology usually works based upon the people who program it. And so we find over and over, especially in urban communities, when you put together facial recognition software and you don't use people who look like us, and even though it's being targeted towards us, then it often cannot reflect us accurately. Remember the first time I used one of those little, AI tools to tell them to make an image of my face, and I told them what to do and whatever, and it came out with a white guy named Kevin in a suit and tie. That's not me. I didn't have anybody programming black guys. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah, but think about that, how it's like an economic disadvantage and how they hide things like that. And so overall, in our last few minutes here talking, I really want to ask you guys in your closing statements to sort of talk about what do you think this bill means going forward, and give people a few nuggets that they can go and engage, not that you haven't done a lot already, but continue to give them those final points on what we can use to talk about this bill so that we're prepared going forward to fight some of the other things that we're seeing come about. So I started down there first last time. I'm going to start down here, Chris.
Yes, there's actually one thing that we hadn't gotten to, because there's so much in this bill, that I want everybody to pay attention to, is the changes to the Consumer Financial Board. I'm forgetting the P. The Consumer Protection Board. Why that's a big deal. So in my industry specifically, a lot of people probably remember 2008. Right? And how the financial world was falling apart, banks were blowing up, and the government had to come in and save them, right? This organization helps protect against that and other things. So for example, they fight predatory lending. Remember when payday loans were like 300%, 400%, 500%? That's something that this organization does. If you had medical debt and like medical collections under $500, in 23, They were able to eliminate that from your credit reports. This organization is there to protect the consumer, to make sure people like myself are fully licensed and acting as fiduciary, to make sure that your interests are over the bank's interests or over an advisor's interest. It's to make sure that that if somebody's doing something fraudulent, that there's somebody to fight for you. This organization's budget is being slashed by half. Now, one thing you'll remember is like in 2008, 2009, when Obama came into place, he's like, look, this financial world's a mess, regulation, right? Which people in my industry didn't like because they don't like being told what to do. But it was in the best interest of Americans, right? Making sure that people were doing the right thing. The first thing that the current administration did in the previous one that came in the first time was deregulate, and all the banks were happy, right? He's doing that again. The reason why you cut a budget by half is because that way you can start cutting staff, you can start cutting the people that are able to help people. And now you're gonna start seeing 30, 40% interest rates. It's not conspiracy, that's just fact. When banks are allowed to run wild, they do. So I want people to pay attention to the Consumer Protection Board and make sure that, that we're fighting for this. Make sure that your rights are protected. It's really gonna cost us hundreds of millions of dollars every year. As a matter of fact, I do have a couple facts. I don't want to run too long. So last year alone, they were able to get back $363 million for consumers.
I think the battery went out.
Yeah. Last year alone, they were able to get back $363 million for consumers. And they help about they do about $200 million transactions a year, helping and doing investigations, things of that nature. They're really the protection between us and capitalism, to keep capitalism honest. So that's all I really have.
Just to remind folks that this Medicaid bill takes place January of 2027. So that's an important date because folks are going to have to re-enroll. And part of what my organization does yearly, annually, is to track folks down that haven't sent in their paperwork to get Medicaid. So people move, phone numbers change, and the population that we service are very transit. So it takes us an extra 3 months just to catch up with folks. 6 months, they don't want folks on Medicaid. My organization, we're gonna lose like 1,200 people because of that, which is equivalent to about $1 million in services. So you gotta remember the dates. The bill is here, and this is how we take action in regards to helping folks stay on Medicaid. They gotta do the paperwork. And if they can't, then we have folks that can help them. Also, Detroit Community Health Connection is a federally qualified healthcare center. We see patients without insurance and underinsured. We cannot turn folks away based on their ability not to pay. That's who we are. That's why we're in business. So folks can have a medical home with their own provider. We're at FQHC, and there are 18 different FQHCs in the city of Detroit. We're the best kept secret when it comes to healthcare. People think because they don't have insurance, they can't go to the doctor, they gotta go to the emergency room. The emergency room is just a quick fix, and you're gonna get a quick fix bill as well. So think about an FQHC and spread the word about FQHCs in the city of Detroit.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of information about how this bill impacts our state budget. So federal funds make up about 40% of our state budget. So when I'm talking about, when I say this is important, the dollars that come in from Medicaid, they come through our state and they go down to the various organizations and things like that that are providing many of these services and things of that nature. And so what happens is when we are cutting these dollars, our state budget is very reliant on what the federal government does and the changes that they made. So 40% of our state budget is putting Michigan at the top 10 of states that are most reliant on federal funds. With the passage of H.R. 1, we're bracing for major federal cuts to Medicaid, to SNAP, and reduction in federal funds that do not translate to savings for the state. It's simply going to shift the cost, and that's what a number of the provisions are designed to do, is they shift the cost from the federal government to the state, and that impacts the way it's able to serve. So that's things like increases in Medicare costs. There's even a provision that limited how Michigan pays for its share of the Medicaid program. That's through the provider tax. And so in the budget agreement that was passed by our legislature, they put in place a way to try and keep the provider tax in place, but that is subject to approval of the federal government as well. And so the thing is that, as I talked about earlier, this bill, H.R. 1, is really a benefit bill for the rich and not the rest of us. And so one of the things that we have to do is that we have to start by looking at what we can do in Michigan to soften the hits that we take. And so the legislature has started to move into that way. One of the things that we recommended in our analysis a few months ago was that we need to decouple our business taxes from how the federal government does it. And we did that, and the state was actually able to save money that way, save revenue. And so that helps to soften the cost. But there are other things that we can do. We need to ask our state legislators to look at putting in place taxes on rich individuals, because that can allow us to not to have to cut programs or make it more difficult for people to get access to these things, or just to say we're not going to be in SNAP at all, or Medicaid. And so those are some of the things that we really have to think about. And obviously, staying informed is very important. And I'm glad that the League can be a resource in that. I think you have other experts here as well who can provide some great information on how these things are going to affect us. I'll say this: an informed public, an informed voter is one of the most powerful things that we have to combat these things. And so I would encourage you to be a very informed voter as we get ready for this next, as we move into 2026.
I want you all to give a round of applause for our panel. We got about 2 more minutes before I take some questions from the audience, but I just want to add, because this is my other role, is to encourage people about how activism is so important. Of course, you're showing it here, being present, gaining a wealth of information, and you have had great leadership come in front of you, and so we're investing in you. We're asking you to take action. But one of the things I think that we're living in, and we're living in this world in which sometimes we can see things as overwhelming. It's so much occurring. It's so much happening every day, which was by design, by the way. When we were telling people about what they were doing and how they were preparing for this election, and no one believed it, they were planning to come in here and to move swiftly and to overwhelm your psyche, to overwhelm your mental status, and make you feel like you can't fight back. But I grew up in Denzel Washington was my favorite actor. And so as I was growing up and watching him through the multitude of movies, I never forget one of my favorites. And it's, it's called John Q. And you remember that his wife said to him in there, do something. And she implored him to where this man took over a whole hospital and said, I'm going to hold people captive. I'm going to do whatever is necessary to get my son this heart transplant. He was willing to go to jail for it. He's willing to fight for it. But see, that was fictional. And the NAACP stands on the back of people who actually did it in real life. And in real life, we did something. We marched, and people say, oh, marching is old, don't nobody need to march. Let me tell you something, they're so scared of marching that it worked because it worked all over the world, and it still works to this day. Marching is not something you should be afraid of because it's feet on the street. And feet on the street has more to do with laws being changed, overturned, and altered than pretty much anything else in this world. And so you have to be willing to do something, whether it's marching. But you also got to do a little more in today's world. You got to use your social media. Too much of our social media is quiet. I don't care if they're cheating the algorithms or not. For the few people who get to see it, it's important you use that. But you also got to text a few people now and then and say and remind them of what's going on. Because many people have not been given the ability to analyze what they hear. It's a wealth of data thrown at everybody today. It's actually overwhelming. It's too much. When we were kids, my mother paid for the Encyclopedia Britannica. We had the 1978 edition. If anybody in this room don't know what I'm talking about, they gave you about 27 books. Probably cost my poor mama $2,000. She had to finance it over a period, and probably in a year after the books, not even a year, the day after the books was printed, that information was a little off. Mm-hmm. But if you didn't have it, and you didn't have it, everybody in the neighborhood would come and knock your door and say, hey, can we borrow your encyclopedia? I need letter R. And they knock on the door and they say, can I get that from you? And what we were in effect doing was sharing knowledge. And many times we'd find in our neighborhood, because we were right there in the middle of the block, everybody would come to the middle of the block to borrow the encyclopedia. So my mother wasn't just educating us three and the other 4 or 5 foster kids that were with us at all times. She was educating the whole block. And so that's what we have to do. We have to get back to educating the whole block. And so when they read something or you hear something, you help them analyze it and you help them think about it. Because right now people get a little bit and they run with it. This is how you see many people who look like us stand in places and defend people who do everything to hurt us. Because they don't have the analytical ability, or they're too evil or too crooked to know what they're saying is wrong. But we can think now in this SNAP benefit situation going on. And you can see a lot of people standing outside. I don't know if you've seen the viral reel this week, where you see a lot of people and the guy says, hey, where your red hats at? And they said, oh, we don't want to hear that today, stop it. And they're standing in the food line waiting. And because those people lack the analytical ability to understand who put them in that line. So you have participated in this George Crockett Law School, and it's my moment to say this to you. You got to do something with this. You got to take it from here and educate the block. You got to take it from here. I'm not telling you to take over no hospitals and hold people hostages, but you can do it with your mind. And get there and sit down and listen. Young people pretend they don't listen to us, but they do listen. And more importantly, see what you do. So all the young people in your life are wondering, what in the heck are you doing at the George Crockett Law School on Saturdays with the NAACP? And they're curious whether they got the time or inclination or energy to do it. But they're watching you do something. So continue to do more, continue to engage, and let's fight back and represent our people like we know we should. Sorry, I get warmed up, y'all. I think I'm gonna change careers and be a preacher one day. I don't know, who knows? but I want to open the floor for questions. A lot of great information has been shared. So, are there any questions for the panel?
Good afternoon. I'll speak up. Hopefully everybody can hear me. So this may be a loaded question, but right now, I would just love to hear your thoughts on this shutdown. I know that a lot of it has to do with health, right? Our healthcare system and what potentially is going to take place if, one of the parties consents with, thank you. If one of the parties crosses over and, ends the shutdown with agreeing to things. A lot of what you're saying will be affected. I appreciate you all coming here, to give us all of this knowledge. As a chair of the Health and Wellness Committee, I will take this with me and do something with it. Of course, we know that we can help our neighbors by food distributions and donations and things like that. Trump has gotten away so far with continuing this shutdown, all the way up to Supreme Court.
this is potentially going to go through, I hope not the rest of the year, but it seems to me as though they're willing to hold that long, and hold that line, if you will. What can we do? I know that Michigan has a lot of benefits that they're continuing to give, you know, our residents. What are your thoughts on what's going on? I know obviously it's going to drastically affect, Derek, your business, you know, well, all of you. What are some best practices that, you know, caretakers and small businesses can do to, you know, help ease that pain and that burden of potentially our benefits not even partially being funded, right? When that money runs out and it's December, this time December, you know, what are we gonna do?
So these are not professional thoughts. This is just my personal thoughts on it. What we do is we build community. And what I mean by that is if you've got somebody in your neighborhood that struggles with going to the grocery store or needing things or needing somebody to check in on them, we start doing the neighborly thing and checking in on people. We start showing up for people. Maybe we take shifts. Hey, Miss Anderson down the street, maybe we take turns going in and checking in on her and taking care of these things, right? Same thing with people with kids. We become a village because at this point we don't really have any other options. We look at the resources that we have available to us. We educate people to the resources we have available to us because there are tons of resources that are out there. People just don't know about them. So education is going to be huge, educating our neighbors and our friends and family and coming together, working together. It's going to come down to, like, as services decrease, like if somebody can't get somewhere, maybe we do a community, you know, carpool, things of that nature. Really, we're just going to go back to what black folk did right after slavery. We had to do it ourselves.
I was just going to say that we've been here before and we survived. I didn't bring my literature with me today, but I co-host a radio show based on a grant on 107.5 FM every second, and it re-airs on the fourth Saturday. Tomorrow we'll be talking about other resources. There are a lot of resources. There are a lot of nonprofits in the city of Detroit, and we're all almost doing the same thing. So we're coming together to talk about resources, particularly now because of the food situation. So we'll have a lot of resources. We're talking about food, Forgotten Harvest, Gleaners, all those types of places. We'll be talking about the program, well, not a program, but what Audi, the grocery store, is offering for $40 to feed 10 for Thanksgiving. You get a turkey and all the dressings that come along with it. So my organization is going to do something for the patients that we serve in that program. But the only thing that's holding up this bill is the ACA, the tax credits. That's the only thing that's holding up this bill. The Democrats have put something on the table now. We'll see if that happens. But there are backdoor deals that are going on as we speak. My personal opinion, we got 15 more days. 15 more days for some folks to prove a point. That's my personal opinion. When I went to D.C. last month, they expected this. They said it'll last 30 days. We're in, what, 35, 36 now. No more than 15 more days. Somebody has to prove a point. And I'm glad that they're sticking to their guns, because what happens with this tax credit, folks go on the marketplace to buy insurance, for instance, for $800. Without those tax credits, it go up 75%. You'll be paying $1,900. Who can afford that? So that's the only thing that's holding up this bill.
Yeah, and those are excellent points. You know, I'll say this. There are efforts across in our legislature to try and alleviate this problem, especially with the SNAP benefits. There has been legislation that has been introduced. Actually, the state Senate actually passed a bill that included $71 million to try and support SNAP. The governor has released additional funds to food banks across the state. Many of our partners at the League, like the Council of Baptist Pastors in the vicinity, they are working together their churches are working together to develop a list to provide their congregations with food banks that they can access. There's many other organizations like Access in Dearborn, who also works in who also has offices in Detroit. They're doing a lot of things to try and help this. So there's a lot of work that are going on out there. When the state Senate passed the $71 million for additional SNAP benefits, Speaker Hall, the GOP controls the state House. He said that he would not take up that legislation. And so, being able at the state level to pass legislation to try and make sure that families receive at least some dollars to support, to make sure that folks don't go hungry. Because again, in the richest country in the world, there should be no reason that everybody should not have a hot plate of food on their table every single night. And so, one of the things that we need to do is I think that we need to make sure that we're calling our legislators and making sure that they understand our positions. We need to make sure that they're pushing very hard to make sure that our children are, to make sure that our families are fed, our communities are fed. And we also need, if we can, let's reach into our own pockets and make sure that we're supporting our churches. Buying a little extra when you are able to go to the grocery store. I know prices are high, but anything that we can do to make sure that somebody doesn't go hungry, I think we need to take that extra step. There's a lot of organizations that are stepping up and doing the right thing, and at some point, if this continues to go on, I think that there are additional steps that can be taken at the state and local levels, and I do appreciate what our mayor and many mayors across the region are doing to try and activate the community in a way to make sure that families are properly fed. So let's support those efforts.
Thank you so much. We got time for one more question, and that's it. And I know you had your hand up earlier.
So I just want to go back to when you said the community getting involved, like going to help Miss Anderson or whoever it is. We still have to be mindful that some people has never been put in this situation. So instead of 10 people going to help her, there be one point person to help, because pride is out there. And it's a lot of people that has never been through this situation. So we have to be, I'm all for helping, but you can't just have 10 people going to her or whoever it is to help. Everybody wants to help, but you got to think about their mentality and to be more mindful of how the help is presented to them.
Absolutely.
No, you want to answer the question?
So, no, absolutely. There is a way to do things with humility. One of the things I've done on a much smaller scale was providing food for people for Thanksgiving. A lot of people don't want to show up and be handed a turkey and handed a bunch of things. It feels weird, or it feels, it doesn't feel right. So what we started doing is I'd have people get together, everybody comes up with gift cards to whatever grocery store is closest to that person or that family, and let that family go have the experience of shopping for themselves. There's a way to help in a way that's not, look at me, I'm helping.
That's right.
But it's truly about the work, right? It doesn't matter who gets credit for it, it's about getting the job done. And to your point, everybody's a little bit different, so we're gonna focus on people that know the people in the community to figure out how's best to approach and help. And some people may not want it, and that's okay. But those that do want it and are afraid to ask for it, if we present it in the right way, to your point, we can absolutely help our own community, because nobody else is going to come save us.
Sometimes, let me just
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Sometimes we just got to do. You don't have to ask. You're going to the store and get a turkey. Buy Miss Jones next door a turkey, and just drop it off. You don't have to ask. When you see something, do something. It's just that simple.
I want to thank you all again. I'm sorry we have to ask that question afterwards. The moderators have asked me to wrap up, so we have other business to attend to. And so I know that these outstanding panelists, again, if you could give them a round of applause. And I hopefully they don't have to run right out the door and they can get your question answered. But with that, thank you so much for your time and your attention and the great questions and participations. I'm going to turn it back over to Attorney Richard Mack.
Let's give a warm, warm round of applause for Brother Tolbert and these panelists. The dynamic preacher man Tolbert, I'm telling you, whenever we bring him up, he always brings it down. There was actually, we do have to be out here at a certain time, but, and we obviously had to make accommodation for that. But, yeah, there's supposed to be voting has consequences Q&A, but didn't. I think Tolbert took care of that. I mean, honestly, this is really what you heard. If you don't need anything more than what you just heard from Brother Tolbert and the panelists up here as to why voting has consequences, I don't know what else to tell you, honestly. Well, I would just say there's one piece. If each and every one of us in this room took 10 people to the polls in November 2024, Trump doesn't win Michigan. Trump doesn't win Pennsylvania. Trump doesn't win Wisconsin. And we don't have to worry about an ugly bill. When it comes to this whole shutdown, it's not even the people with subsidies. I'm on ACA. I'm a partner at our firm. We don't give health care for partners. I'm paying $781 now. Not getting a subsidy, my bill goes up to $1,300. Not getting a subsidy. So this isn't about just working poor, quote unquote, that this is impacting. This is having an impact across the nation. So if you remember nothing else about voting has consequences, the next time that this organization, the NAACP, says go out and vote, we're not going to tell you who to vote for. You can guess who I would say vote for. We're not going to tell you who to vote for, but we're going to say go out and vote. Take 10 people. Like Kevin said, text people and say, let's get to the polls. Here's why you should vote the way that I'm suggesting. Then we don't have to deal with this again. We don't have to say, I told you so. We can say, aren't you glad? So with that, we want to thank you. Wait. We want to mind you. So, yeah, Lori Moore, thank you. Excellent point. Excellent point. So the point that the information that you just heard here, invaluable. One of the points was how this is having an impact statewide. Lori Moore just made the point, contact your legislators, contact your congresspersons, contact the people that you live in their district where you are either voting for them or supposed to be voting for or against them. Because they're the ones who are taking their messages back to Lansing, to D.C. Know who they are. If you do nothing else other than taking 10 people to the polls, you need to make sure to know who your legislators are, know more about these bills, read the newspaper, educate yourself, educate your community. Excellent thing that Kevin talked about, how the Encyclopedia Britannica, now you don't have to do that. Now you can just send text messages or Facebook or Instagram. So make sure to do that, please. Thank you.
Thank everybody for being here today. Remember the principle behind the Crockett Law School. Each one, teach one. You're here today, you get all this valuable information. You can't just go home now and say, oh, I'm so smart. You got to go home now and talk to your neighbors, your cousins, your sisters, your brothers. And then you got to come back next year, because Crockett is every year, 28 years and running. Every fall, we do this. Free of charge, no admission requirements. You don't have to pass any tests in order to attend this college, this law school. And you don't have to pay any tuition. Thank you. And be safe.